If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this. People who work late night security or outdoors in the middle of the night, what was your scariest paranormal encounters and creepiest hauntings? Share your horror stories. Not me, but my uncle used to operate a movie theater in the 80s. After the midnight show, he would shut off the projector, take that day's collection in a bag, lock the theater, and walk home. The midnight show usually ends around 2 a.m., and the streets are completely empty during that time. The road to his house is a narrow, unpaved one, barely one car can fit. As he reached that road, he saw a little girl around 12 years old standing there with an expressionless face. My uncle asked, "Why are you here, kid? Where's your home? I'll walk you home." The kid kept giving him a creepy death stare and wasn't saying a word. After a while, my uncle stopped trying to get her talk and decided to walk home. He started walking, and after a while he turned back, and the kid was gone. Suddenly he felt a weight on his shoulder, as if someone heavy was sitting on his shoulder. He fell to the ground, losing his balance because of the weight. He managed to get up and look around, but no one was seen. He got up and ran home. He still doesn't have an explanation for what happened. He said the weight he felt was heavier than a 12-year-old girl. I'm a travel RN, did a stint in Warren, Pennsylvania, worked on a cardiac floor, but got pulled down to the CCU, critical care unit, and the patient kept saying she saw a dark figure in her room, standing behind the door and staring at her from the corner. I assured her no one was there, she was probably dreaming. She said bullshit, and I told her, well, next time she sees them, ring her bell. About an hour goes by, I hear her yell, and then her bell comes on. I walk to the room, and right before I get there, I hear the bathroom door shut. Thinking the patient is in the bathroom, I walk in and she's in bed, and she looks at me and calmly says, "She's in the bathroom." I open the door, no one there. Odd, but I still didn't think much of it. Patient wasn't confused or on any mind-altering medications. She insisted a nurse kept coming in and just standing there in the dark and staring at her. It was literally just me and another nurse working this small 6-bed unit. I thought it was weird but forgot about it. Then a few months later I get pulled down to that unit again. The middle of the night patient in the same room rings his bell. I go in, and he says, "What's up with this nurse that keeps coming in and just standing there? Who is she?" My heart sank and started pounding. It was the same room, same story, months apart. Insane. I spoke with other nurses, and they confirmed that the unit is indeed haunted. Working on a mine site in Western Australia as a security/medical. Sitting at my desk at like 2 a.m. with a view of the access road to the site, which is about 1.5 hours from the nearest town. Someone is walking down the access road, I can see him clearly and the dust he is kicking up as he walks. The site itself was shut down, there were only 3 other workers aside from me. I rang them and told them I have someone approaching my office and to call and check back in with me in 5 minutes, to make sure I have not been murdered. In preparation of my expected conversation with this man, I open the window to my office so I can speak to him. He gets to about 10 meters away from me and just fades and disappears into nothingness. I close the window, lock it, walk into the back office, and call my college demanding he come and pick me up. When he does, he advises me someone died in the crib room, break room, near my office after being shot in a bikie gang-related incident nearby. I thought he was just trying to freak me out even more, then I found a coroner's report, it was true. I found the guy's photo, and it gave me goosebumps right away, 100% the guy I saw walking towards my office. This is something that happened to me around 30 years ago. I worked for a security company at the time, where my night was spent driving around and checking clients' premises, responding to alarm and fire activations, etc. On one particular night, I was checking a timber yard, which I did 3 times a night every night. It was standard practice, and all I did was open the gate, walk around the premises, and clock in at a certain point at the building to show I was there. When I was walking around the back of the building, I suddenly saw something that flew directly in front of me. It was about 50 feet in front of me, around 20 to 30 feet in the air, and looking at it, I can only describe it as a creature that measured around 6 to 8 feet in length with a brown/grayish tattered type garment and a gray-colored head going at very high speed. I can tell you 100% it wasn't a bird, as we don't have birds of that size in our country, and the fact that I literally froze with the hairs on the back of my head standing up proved to me it was something I couldn't explain. I literally got such a fright after seeing this thing that I couldn't move for around 2 to 3 minutes afterwards. I don't scare easily, and I certainly knew exactly what I saw. It was the head and the tattered cloak that I saw very clearly, and to this day I still can't explain what it was. But one thing is for sure, it scared the hell out of me, and I never forgot it. I once worked the third shift at a home for the developmentally disabled. Our state hospital had shut down and left a bunch of families with nowhere to place their developmentally disabled family members, who were in need of more care than the families could provide. One such parent founded and built a series of homes for this population, and it became a successful option for these families and their loved ones. The homes were set up with 4 bedrooms, a bathroom, laundry room, and kitchen on both sides, with an enormous pantry connecting the two. On each side, there was a front door, a parking lot, and a sliding glass door leading out to a patio and generously fenced-in backyard. Each night, there was one person assigned to each side of the home, and when we arrived to work for night shift, the residents of these homes were usually already asleep. It was our job to check on them at intervals and do prep work for meals and such for the first shift. One night in particular, I was working opposite a guy I'd just met, but he was pretty great, and I felt immediately comfortable with him. I was in the kitchen after making food for the next day and was cleaning out the fridge of food that was over 3 days old when I got the intense feeling of being watched from behind. I turned around toward the scallop window in the door, and I saw the face of a young girl who was clearly developmentally disabled in the window. It startled me, especially since she wasn't one of our residents. She looked distraught, and as I was moving toward her and making eye contact, she disappeared. There was one moment, then just gone. I was understandably pretty freaked out. I went through the pantry to the opposite side of the house to tell my coworker what had just happened, and I described her in great detail. As I did so, his face just went white, and he ran off to another room and came back with a photo album. He opened it to a certain page and sat it down on the counter, and there she was. The girl. I said, "Oh my God, that's her," and pointed to her face in the picture. He then had a pretty big freak out and said we were doing everything together for the rest of the night, because I just pointed to a former resident who had died in the parking lot. She'd had an emergency, and an ambulance had been called, but they hadn't even made it out of the parking lot before she passed away. Now, I try to find reasonable, rational explanations for things like this, but I'm not ashamed to say that my blood ran cold right then, and we did, in fact, do everything together for the remainder of that night. I was working at a healthcare facility for the elderly as a CNA overnight. It was about 2 a.m., and I decided to go out back for a smoke break. The back door is located next to double doors where we get deliveries, take out the trash, and where they remove corpses from the basement. I'm standing close to the double doors outside by myself when I hear a loud bang. Of course it scared the shit out of me, and I looked over toward the sound. I heard another bang. I peek at the double doors and see them moving as if something is slamming against them trying to get out. I didn't stay around to see if anything actually came out. I flew my ass back into the building. Foolishly I decided to take the elevator back to my floor, and in my panic I hit the wrong button. The wrong button being the one that sends you to the basement and opens on the side to the room where we put dead bodies. I cried when those elevator doors opened to a dark room. I had no idea if a body was in there or not. I cried while pressing the door close button, and it seemed to take longer than usual for the doors to close. I finally made it back to my floor in tears and told my charge nurse what happened. Of course she thought I was making it up. After I finally got myself to calm down, I tried to think of any reason why those double doors would bang like that. I couldn't think of a single reason. The janitors take out the trash in the morning and aren't there overnight. There was no coroner van parked anywhere near, so no one was being taken away. The wind was not blowing. If it were a coworker, they would have had to run and throw themselves against the door multiple times, and that's just ridiculous because only one person knew I was outside and she had to stay on the floor. What the hell was it? I'll never know. I do know that I never went outside by myself again, and it never happened again. Recently, I started working at a security company. What we do is patrol buildings at night to make sure things run smoothly. One night, as I'm driving out of a house with the driver's window open, I hear a crystal clear whistle from the tree next to the car, 2 a.m. I freeze completely, but I didn't show any movement whatsoever. Every night when I pass from that certain spot, I feel uneasy. Fast forward today, 1 month later. Same neighborhood, different street. I get out of the car with my flashlight to check up on a house. Dead silence, 3 a.m., I hear a whistle right behind me, 5 to 10 meters, and my instinct was to turn around fast and point the flashlight there. Instantly the dogs around the street went crazy and started barking. I quickly returned to my car and drove away. Thoughts? What I'm worried about is that whatever it was, it knows that I heard it. So, I work armed security in a rich neighborhood near Fort Worth, filled with old houses. Specifically, I work at 2 houses. One is occupied by a widowed lady in her 70s, while the second house is unoccupied. Coworkers and the lady herself have reported seeing and feeling apparitions in the first house. I haven't heard of anything in the second house. Until tonight. I'm still here. I'll be off in a little over 30 minutes. We have cameras all over the place that we're supposed to observe for any abnormal movement or activity. Usually, all I see are the occasional raccoon or squirrel. Tonight has been different, though. One camera in particular looks toward a set of oak doors. This is one of only two that doesn't kick over to night vision when it gets dark. There are 4 trees in view, as well as some shrubbery. It's a calm night here. No wind, no rain, nothing. Periodically, I've seen one particular branch start shaking violently. Like something is grabbing a fruit tree, trying to make stuff fall to the ground. Right above that has been a shadow in the brush. It's not the brush itself. I can see through all the leaves to the wall since the brush isn't that thick. The shadow is in the form of someone standing there. Whenever I go out there with my flashlight to look, the vigorous shaking stops and shadow isn't there. Keep in mind, there is no wildlife moving about on this part of the property. They're always in the back, where there is the least amount of movement. I walk back there every couple of hours, but that's about it. The part where I'm seeing the movement is in the driveway, where my truck is parked. I'm the only one here. My relief shows up at midnight. At one point, I saw what looked like the shadow bending over and reaching down for something and then standing back up. Whenever I go out there, I talk, whether to myself or to whatever entity is moving about here. I'm not sure if I should be talking to it because I don't want to make it think I'm instigating it. This kind of stuff scares the shit out of me. I'm not one to believe in ghosts or other stuff like that. My brain has always tried to explain it away or see some rational reason behind whatever is happening. But this stuff is beyond my explanation. My mind plays worst case scenario crap over and over, making me even more scared. I'm afraid something will actually appear or something will interact with my voice when I'm out there. I talk because it calms me, though. I don't know what to think of it. I just want to get the hell out of here for the night. And then I worry about, what if whatever this nonsense is attaches itself to me and follows me home? My brain hates me. Interested in people's opinions on this. I work nights and on my days off generally keep the same pattern of sleep. I was awake at roughly 4 a.m. and decided to pop outside for a smoke before I got some sleep. I wasn't overly tired, so what I saw shouldn't have been affected by that. I was rolling my smoke in my living room when I heard talking in the direction of my back door. Knowing my back door is securely locked, I head into my kitchen to check through the windows when I see a large deer very close to the window looking at it. It was at eye level with me, and I'm 5 feet 4 inches. After about a minute of eye contact, it rounded the corner of my patio. I returned to my living room to check out the window where it should have been visible, and it was totally gone. It had no escape routes. It's a dead end with no gaps in the fence. It also didn't set off our outdoor lighting, which is normally very sensitive to movement. Even cats typically trigger it. Large deer are not native to my area of the UK, we only get small roe deer. Even if it was just a very big deer, that doesn't explain the talking I heard a moment before. I hate my job sometimes. I know there's something paranormal going on in this building. But I don't let it bother me. My coworker, another guard, makes things worse when we go to our patrols. I don't know if he can see stuff, but he starts breathing heavy when we go in the areas where there's no people, dark, no lights, especially the morgue. He refuses to step 1 foot inside. All we have to do is make sure the back door is locked. There's noises there sometimes, scratching, thuds that sound like footsteps, but then again, the boiler room is in the same area with a lot of pipes. One time when I stepped out of the morgue, I heard a thud sound in the room. I won't lie, it made me nervous. My coworker who was standing by the doorway almost crapped his pants. Imagine a 6 feet 4 inches hulking man shrieking like a girl. I think I need to recite prayers before I enter these areas. The shrouded white entity at the hospital. I work from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. I lock the facility down when the cleaning crew is finished and leaves for the night, which is around 10. I unlock the facility between 3 and 4, which is around where this encounter took place. I went to unlock the offices in the back of the building, which I hate the most because it's the furthest point from where my desk is. After I unlocked the offices, I had to go down the surgical hallways to unlock those doors. This is near the whisper room, which is connected to the hallways where the door closes and the shadow runs. Anyhow, back to last night. The surgical hallway is dimly lit, accompanied by flickering lights and metallic buzzing. This is a maintenance problem, though, not supernatural. I had stopped and grabbed a cup of ice water before heading down the hallway. I unlocked both doors, then double-checked to make sure that the emergency exit was secure. I did a push test on the door, and as I turn around, I see the same shrouded white apparition, which was about 2 feet to my right. I screamed, I cursed, I fell, and I spilled my water all over the floor. My heart was racing like hell. While on the ground, there wasn't anything around me. The thing had disappeared from vision just as quickly as it showed up. I went to the maintenance closet to grab a mop and some rags, then went back to clean up the mess. In that process, I didn't see anything else, but I had that psychological feeling that something was watching me. In an effort to lighten the mood, I said, "Next time you're cleaning this shit up." When I came in for my shift, which is where I am now, I asked one of the day nurses about it, and she mentions having seen a white figure moving across the hall once, and one of the night nurses claimed that she had seen something similar in one of the patient rooms right after a tropical storm had hit, but never knew if it was something paranormal or if she mistook it for out-of-place hospital machinery. I find the entity intriguing in an unsettling kind of way. From what the two nurses have said, they both saw it at the very least in the same hallways, closer to the exit door, which is where I encountered it for the first time. But given that I saw it on the other side of the building, I know it isn't restricted to that area alone. I don't even know where to begin figuring out why it's here or what it actually is. I've been a mortician for over a decade and have never had any issues with anything paranormal. Around 6 months ago, a new girl started working at the funeral home. She and her family claim to be sensitive, do different divination rituals, and are psychic. She's even admitted to me she has done black magic to get back at an ex-boyfriend. So here's the deal, like I said, nothing has ever happened to me regardless of the funeral homes I've worked in. I've been there alone all hours of the night, nothing. So the past few months, weird things have started happening. My other coworker has had weird things happen at her home, like things randomly appearing, her son is sleepwalking and speaking to someone outside, or pictures are flying across the room. At the funeral home, we've heard whispering on multiple occasions and doors slamming. Now comes my turn. The other night I'm embalming alone, and I thought I kept seeing someone standing out of the corner of my eye, but I kept telling myself it was my mind messing with me. The door that leads outside is right outside of the room where I'm embalming. I have the door open to the embalming room. The door that goes outside has a metal bar that you pull to latch and lock it. Everything is locked obviously since I'm alone. So no more than 5 minutes after I kept seeing someone standing out of the corner of my eye, I hear a massive slam against the metal bar on the door. It was so loud I almost had a heart attack. What is your opinion on this matter? Do you think it's someone I've helped over the years make their name, or do you believe it's something more? I personally think the new girl brought something with her. Her grandmother has even told her she has an attachment. I'm terrified and really don't want to work alone. I'm afraid if it's more than just a spirit cleansing, it will make it more upset and make things worse. Help. I've been working in armed security for nearly a decade now, but I still remember working unarmed when I started out in my early 20s. I worked my way to a trusted position with my agency, where, at 20 years old, I was assigned to the Colorado Springs Deaf and Blind School. At the time only senior, more experienced officers were permitted to work there at all, but I was given the 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. shifts Monday nights through Saturday mornings. A little backstory on the Deaf and Blind School: it was opened in the early 1870s and was where the burdened children of the state were sent to learn and live. But many were put to work there as laborers working fields or manufacturing items. Because of a number of ailments, accidents, or pre-existing health conditions, a large number of children and staff passed while there, to where in the early 1880s a small cemetery was created and formerly at the intersection of Pikes Peak Avenue and Institute Street. Growing up in Colorado Springs, I was always told ghost stories about the flesh-eating bacteria on stuffed taxidermy animals, ghosts walking in buildings, and the haunted service tunnels below the school connecting to the old train depot, but I never really believed it. Fast forward to my 3rd month posted there, 2 nights before my 21st birthday, and a full week before students returned for the fall semester for actual special needs schooling, and I had my first encounter in the gym. While checking the boys' locker room, a solid black figure ran past the showers. I rushed to find the intruder, not knowing what I would have done to it if I found it, as I was completely unarmed except for a flashlight. After clearing the building twice and checking all the doors multiple times, I just took it as my imagination. The night of my birthday is when everything got much weirder. The shift change proceeded as usual, and all was well until my 2:30 a.m. property and building inspections. When I went into the carriage house's top floor, where the school stores all the spare desks and modern school equipment, it appeared that a person was standing in the back corner near the older stairs. I shouted at the figure and began to charge towards him. In a frenzy, I hurried to cut him off at the first floor door, but when I got to the door, it was still locked with the interior bolt. I searched the first floor when I found the doors to the service tunnels opened. On my first day I was told not to enter the tunnels alone as they expanded for miles in a labyrinth, and before I went in I didn't contact a supervisor. I felt as if I walked for hours, but after only a few minutes I hear in a very soft voice, almost like a kid's voice, "Happy birthday, Mr. Officer." The next thing I knew, my irate supervisor, the school maintenance director, and 2 CSPD officers were shaking me by my shoulders. My supervisor then informed me I missed my 3 a.m. check-in and was sitting in a corner of the tunnels in the dark for over 3 hours. We all left the tunnels in carriage house to see that the sun was beginning to rise. Later that day, my boss reassigned me to a different location after I was cleared by a doctor to work. I don't fully know what I saw or what was in those buildings, but it still gives me chills. I'll never forget the voice that made me black out for so long. "Happy birthday, Mr. Officer." I live in a rural area in Central Europe, the sort where civilization consists entirely out of tiny towns every few kilometers with nothing but roads and fields between them, and I'm starting to believe something strange might be running around here. I work for a company near my home. Their name isn't important, and I don't intend to disclose it, but what matters is that I work afternoon shifts for them, so from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock. I've developed a habit during these shifts. I sometimes make a trip on foot to the nearest town and buy myself some snacks in a little shop if there's nothing in the company canteen I'm interested in or if I just want the office work to go a little bit faster. Though this trip involves a little bit of walking in the dark whenever it's winter time. The compound I call a workplace is on an edge of a town, but there is a stretch of road for about 200 meters where there are no lamp posts at all. There's one at the compound entrance and one at the first building within the zone, but between them can sometimes be pitch black even by the time I make these trips when the sun sets really early. I never really minded it. I'm not afraid of the dark, the wildlife here isn't dangerous, and I honestly quite enjoyed the nightly aesthetic of that road. But that was only until a certain experience I had in January that made me change a few habits. I headed out into the darkness like normal. It was a really cloudy evening, so the whole road was properly pitch black. I couldn't even see the edge of the road. I had to judge where to walk by feeling how much I'm stepping into the mud beside it. About a third of the way through this stretch, I started hearing the distinct sound of hooves hitting the ground, walking beside me. I thought it was weird. It could have only been a deer or a boar, and those don't tend to approach people, but I just tried to make myself louder and scare it away by really putting a stomp to my steps. It followed me for a couple minutes, but it went away before I got near the lamppost and could see what it was. The really weird part only came on the way back, though. I was on the other side of the road and once again could hear the hooves in the darkness to my left. I thought the stomping might work again, but then it started speaking. I think? It sounded like a man's voice right next to me repeating a single word of gibberish in varying pitch and intonation. At that point, I just bolted it towards the compound gate, and by the time I reached the light, the thing was completely gone. I haven't been on that road after sunset since then, but for a few months I was convinced that it had to be someone messing with me, even though it makes absolutely no sense for anyone to have been on that road in an empty field in complete darkness. But the reason I'm writing this is something I saw this week. I was coming home after being dropped near my house by my colleague. I had to walk on this unsustained path to get to my gate, and since it was a really bright night, I could see the silhouette of all my neighbors' rooftops against the night sky. In that skyline, I noticed how weirdly tall one of the house's chimneys was. It really stood out, and I didn't remember any of my neighbors' chimneys being this massive. But I thought nothing of it until the next night, when I walked the same path in a similarly bright night and noticed there is no damn chimney on this part of the roof, so I have no clue what I saw. Does anyone have a rational explanation for either of these? Because I'm a little bit at a loss. I personally didn't even want to talk about this at first, because I've always thought people sound so crazy when they claim they've seen ghosts. The more I experience, the crazier I feel. I've been trying to rationalize things, but I've never dealt with anything like this before. So I work in a large storeroom, Maine, in a hospital from late evening until around 6 a.m. This supply room is located somewhere above the old morgue, of which the entrance has been bricked over. Not really relevant, but just kind of crazy to me since I didn't have any experiences until I was made aware of this. I don't seek things out or jump at every little thing. I actually wear earbuds and crank the volume to pretend nothing is happening. I'll hear things fall, but look and see that nothing actually fell off of the shelves. So after my friends in security told me about the migraine, the lights would flicker in my department infrequently. I rationalized this as old wiring. When I made a supply delivery to the postpartum floor, the lights flickered once. This is in a wing very recently built. It is the only small supply room I deliver to that I am almost always completely alone in while putting away supplies. Then about 3.5-4 weeks ago, the lights flickered very hard in the main storeroom. As this happened, my phone screen flickered at the same time. About a week later, at approximately 2 a.m., I was holding a paper up looking at items I needed to pull for an order. By the edge of the paper, across from the row I was in, I saw a black face with white eyes peeking at me from around a shelf. It had a hand wrapped around the pole of the shelf, no different from a child peeking around a doorframe. When I cut my eyes over to get a better look, what I saw didn't vanish, it more so pulled away. Like it slipped back around the shelf. I rationalized and told myself I was just tired. In reality, I didn't feel worn out at all. Now to last night. I know almost the exact time, because I was so terrified I actually called my mom immediately. At about 1 a.m., I was pulling my last order for the night, and I had just a few items left. Loudly, I heard supply items fall off of the shelving on a different row. I ignored it and continued listening to a podcast. Telling myself that if I don't give it any attention, it'll stop. After about 5 or 6 minutes, I was sitting down logging changes to my order, and I heard supplies fall from another row. This time louder than the first. I wanted to play it off, but my heart was racing. I called my mom and told her, "Hey, were you asleep? You're going to stay on the phone with me for at least a few minutes." This was at 1:09 in the morning. I didn't want to say out loud what was going on, but she picked up on it from my mentioning it a week before. I told her I was going to start making my deliveries to the floors, so once I got out of the storeroom, I'd leave her alone so she could sleep. I'm not religious, but she told me I needed to pray when these things are happening. She asked if I was in a safe place, and I told her I should be okay. I was taking my delivery up to NICU and postpartum. I let her go, as I felt I would be fine. NICU's delivery went as usual, but as soon as I took my cart into the postpartum supply room, I didn't even get to put away one item before the lights flickered hard. I flew into a panic and immediately left the room to catch my breath. I tried to ask the nurses at the station if they ever experienced the lights flickering in that room, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. I tell myself this stuff isn't real or explain it away. Am I crazy? If this is real, what could I be dealing with? What should I do? I've never seen or experienced anything like this in my life until now. I thought I'd share some experiences from my short time as the night watchman at a very old, historic cemetery. I worked the 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift. The cemetery generally closed at 6 p.m., so around 5:30 p.m., I would lock the main gate and then start driving through the cemetery to notify any visitors that we'd be closing soon. I'd instruct them to park in a line in front of the locked main gate, and when my drive through the grounds was complete, I would unlock the main gate. Everyone would leave, and I would lock the gate behind them. So one day, I'm in the middle of my final drive-through and see an old lady slowly walking the sidewalk alongside a mausoleum. The mausoleum was hundreds of feet long, about 20 feet tall, and had no breaks in it. It was one long stretch. The road ran directly alongside the sidewalk of the mausoleum, so I pull up behind the lady, to tell her we're closing, get out of my car, take my eyes off of her for a split second as I'm getting out of the car, and when I shut the door and look up, she's gone. Completely vanished. I didn't think anything paranormal at first, I just thought maybe I lost sight of her. But the sidewalk and road are completely empty. I ran all the way around to check the back of the mausoleum, but no one was there. Across from the mausoleum was a whole field of graves, and I eagle-eyed the shit out of every row. Not a soul in sight. I finish up my roundup and sit in my car the rest of the night, in a well-lit area. I saw a fully visible person, I know it. No tricks of light, no hallucinations. Plain as day. This encounter seemed to break open the proverbial dam, because after this, I had numerous, unexplainable occurrences. 1. The guy who worked the day shift there, which was 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., was a grimy dude. We'll call him Bart. Part of our job was to go around the cemetery and check the graves for personal effects left by family members and remove them. Many people left things like toys for children who had passed away, birthday cards, mementos, etc. I personally hated this policy and refused to enforce it. Who was I to take a dead child's toy fire engine and throw it away? But Bart had the habit of scouring the cemetery for things he deemed valuable and would take them home instead of throwing them away or bringing them to the office to be picked up by the family. In the short time I worked there, Bart's mental state deteriorated. He started spending hours there, even after his shift was over, walking around the cemetery and drinking heavily. He seemed detached and even more out there than when I first met him. Eventually, when I didn't see him for a week or so, I asked about him, and my boss said he just no-called, no-showed, and never heard from him again. I often wondered if he developed some type of attachment from bringing so many objects home he shouldn't have. 2. Lastly, the experience that led to me quitting. Once Bart stopped showing up, I picked up his Saturday morning shift. It was a quiet day, so I pulled my car around the back of the old chapel to take a nap. The chapel was surrounded by 12-foot-high hedges, so I figured it was a good spot to park for an hour and shut my eyes. I fall asleep and wake up to see my car completely surrounded by dead people. So real, so vivid, so much detail. They were all pressed up against the glass and windshield. They had on the outfits they were buried in, suits and dresses, but all dirty and in different stages of decomposition. No one spoke, and no one moved. They all just stared like I was some zoo exhibit. Then I woke up. I had been asleep, and it was a dream. The thing is, it felt so real. I have never had a dream so real, so vivid before or after. I took it as a message. I called my boss and quit as soon as I left at 4 p.m. I go back to that cemetery from time to time because I have 3 grandparents and an aunt buried there. I never linger too long though, and I always make sure I'm out long before it gets dark. I worked for 20 years, 1995 to 2015, at the state prison, across all shifts and with every separate inmate population we had. By an early point in my career, I thought I had heard all the ghost stories circling throughout the institution, but I hadn't experienced anything too unusual for myself. At least, I don't think so. In 2005, I was pulling a 12-hour graveyard shift in the Women's Substance Abuse Treatment Program unit. This housing unit consisted of 4 physically separate sections, numbered 1 through 4, 18 cells per section, with 2 inmates per cell. There were 2 sections on each side of the building, each section with its own locking door. The sections on each side of the building opened into a larger common area, which was then separated from the front foyer, entryway, by another locking door, a sliding door. So, in other words, in order for an inmate to walk out of the building, she needed to get her cell door open, section door open, foyer door open, and then the front door. I digress. But understanding the layout helps with the story. The graveyard shift consisted of me, I was a sergeant at the time, and 1 other officer. We conducted counts at 10:30 p.m. and then hourly from midnight to 6 o'clock. Also, during our shift, we had culinary workers who we had to wake up to go to work at 4 a.m. We would do the 4 a.m. count a few minutes early, and then when that count cleared, we would let the inmates go to work, usually before 4:30. So this one particular night, I was working in the control room, which sat in a central location between the north and south sides of the building, with my regular partner. This had to have been around 2004 or 2005. It was a little before 2 a.m., and we were both passing the shift surfing around on the internet. This was before Facebook was a thing. We kept it dark in the control room so the inmates could not see in, but the sections and common areas were more lit up for safety and security reasons. Anyways, the 2 a.m. count was approaching, and it was my turn to count, so I was just kind of stretching out and looking for my flashlight and whatnot. I happened to look out of the control room window into the 1 to 2 side common area, and I saw Raylene walk up to the sliding door in front of me. Raylene was an inmate, whose last name I won't mention. She was a big girl, in the sense that she stood nearly 6 feet tall and probably carried 320 pounds. She was quiet, essentially a model inmate, but really just a sweet lady with a substance abuse problem. She was also a culinary worker, so I initially thought nothing of her sudden appearance. Until, as I was walking to the control panel to open that slider, I remembered that, A, she was more than an hour early for work, and B, I had not opened any cell doors. When that hit me, I was like, WTF? So I went back to the window, which had a small metal port we could open to speak with inmates directly, to ask Raylene why the hell she was out of her room so early. Of course, Raylene was no longer standing there. I thought, okay, that's ducking weird, walked back to the cell door control panels to verify the cells were secured, and finding that to be the case, I went out to conduct my count. Now, while doing this, I'm telling myself that when I got to Raylene's cell, if she was up and moving around, she had probably jacked her door and would be getting a write-up. That didn't happen. Raylene was in bed, sleeping on her side with her back to me. She didn't stir when I held the light on her for a little longer than normal, and I was able to physically verify her door was locked. Nothing else happened, but I had the jitters for the rest of the night. I felt like I was being watched and or followed and was wondering who exactly it was that came to that door. I work security, started out with overnights and now mostly work the second shift, which is 2 to 10. The site I work at is an upscale neighborhood where seeing Lamborghinis and Bugattis is commonplace. Anyway, there are 3 main buildings we have to walk through and lock up, one of which is a huge country club. My older brother used to work here and told me weird things go down here at night, but I needed the work so I went for it. The clubhouse gives off a vibe like you're not supposed to be in there, like as I was doing my walkthroughs, it felt like I was being followed or I was being watched, which is creepy enough as it is, never mind the fact that it's built to look old and rustic. There's a particular long hallway inside that a lot of the other guards aren't keen about going down. I usually just turned the lights on and did what I needed to do. One particular night, as I was going to turn the lights on in the hallway, I could see a silhouette of a person just standing there in the middle of the hallway, blacker than black in the darkness. I felt an extreme sense of foreboding and just dreaded, like if I took any step closer, something really bad was going to happen. What did I do? I got the hell out of Dodge. This is actually my last week here because I found another job, but now I don't do walkthroughs in there anymore. Come to find out, I'm not the only one that's had an experience in there. I have been a trucker for more than 20 years in my country, the Dominican Republic, but 2 years ago I arrived in the USA to continue my job. I traveled many times in a few months. It was what they call here an OTR, or over the road. One day I got one recycling load of cardboard and paper that is used as fuel for boilers to produce energy. I left from Colorado to New Mexico. The company is on I-40, Old Route 66, very far from everything. When I got there due to bad luck, and after driving hours, they were running out and I couldn't do anything, so I talked to security, and I explained to him, and I told him that if I can spend the night there until the hours restart and I can deliver the load, he says yes, but after about an hour has passed. Another security comes and tells me that I can't stay there and that it's forbidden, that I have to go to another place. I explain the situation, but I don't come to my senses, so I call my dispatcher to help me with the logbook to be able to move. He says yes, and I managed to move to a place no better because it was lonely, and next to the train station there was another driver who had the same thing happen to him, and since we couldn't find another place, we decided to stay there even though it could be dangerous because of the hour and the truck stops were full and the closest one was about 8 miles away. Well, we stayed in the place, and I went to bed. It was already 10 at night. About an hour later, I hear a knock on the door. At the moment, I just think it's the other driver who needs something because I didn't think that in that place in the middle of nowhere someone would appear. I get up and open the curtain when I see it's a girl no more than 17 years old in a black sweater and shorts. I lower the sail a bit, and I ask her what she wants. She tells me that she has a lot of walking and that she is tired and cold to let her into the truck. I tell her to apologize, but I can't do that because that represented a problem because the company she monitored the truck and had cameras and did not allow unauthorized companions. She kept insisting, but I repeated the same thing to her, but then I only told her that I could give her water and a coat that she no longer used to keep her warm. She took the bottle and the coat, and he disappeared into the darkness. I went back to bed because I had to deliver the cargo at 3 in the morning. Even today I still think about whether he was a real person or a poor lost soul. What do you say to that? I work night shift in a city about 50 miles away. This means I commute about an hour each night there and back. My first experience was when I finished early one morning. I finished at 2 a.m. I drove to my hometown but stopped off at the 24-hour supermarket, the only place other than McDonald's that is open 24 hours a day in my town. From where the supermarket is to my house, the quickest route is a back road through an industrial estate. So by this time it was about 3:30 a.m., and I was driving through the industrial roads. I took a turn in the road, and there was an elderly man walking towards me in the middle of the road. I jumped a little and slowed down to see if he looked okay. It was a weeknight, and all the pubs and clubs would have shut hours ago. We were miles from anything. No houses or anything were within walking distance. He had with him one of those pull-along shopping trolleys that older people use and a distinctive blue shopping bag. I slowed down and looked at him, but he didn't acknowledge me. I was a little concerned it may be someone with dementia or mental illness, but being a woman on my own in the middle of nowhere, I didn't feel comfortable stopping. To be fair, I was just a little creeped out and kept driving. Anyway, a few days later I was driving down the same road in the daytime with my dad. When my dad was a bit younger, he used to work in one of the factories on the industrial estate this road was on. I said, "Oh, I saw someone weird down here the other night. There was an old guy walking in the middle of the road at like 3:30 a.m. My dad said, very matter-of-factly, "Did he have his shopping trolley and blue shopping bag?" And I was like, "Yes." "How did you know that?" And he just said, "Oh yeah, you've seen a ghost, that's old Mick." I've never seen him, but a lot of people around here still see him. He used to walk to the shops that way, but he died years ago. Now, I don't see why my dad would wind me up, and he specifically mentioned the shopping bag and trolley before I mentioned anything. The second experience I had was leaving for work. My car was parked around the corner from my house on a side road, as there's not enough room on the driveway. I get into my car, and as I do, I notice a white car turn into this side road. I don't pay much attention, as I'm not setting off yet. I spend a good 40 to 60 seconds buckling myself in, getting my phone out of my handbag, and picking what songs I want to listen to on the hour-long commute. I glance up after about a minute and notice the car that pulled into the road has stopped beside me. There is a woman in the driver's seat, on her own, just looking straight at me, her window pulled right up to mine. I jump a little as I didn't see or hear the car stop next to mine, and I wonder if she wants directions or if I'm somehow blocking her way. I go to put the window down, but she just opens her mouth real wide, and her eyes bulge out her head, and she gave such a loud, piercing scream I could hear it through the 2 panes of glass. Think the ending of Invasion of the Body Snatchers for reference. She then drove off really fast and turned a corner at the end of the road before I could process what had just happened. Now I know this could be someone ducking with me, but she was on her own, I was on my own, and it was just so strange, and I was surprised to see someone able to contort their face like that. I couldn't explain what I'd just seen, and it was kind of freaky, but I just had to laugh it off and drive to work. I work in home care, so I am essentially an unlicensed nurse that cares for the ill. I've worked with hospice, but the most odd case I had was with I was told by coworkers and my company, nonverbal patient that suffered a brain injury. A lot about his case was miraculous, and he was very religious. The staff was asked to read the Lord's Prayer, to our Father, and Hail Mary to him before bed each night. I was one of the only 2 people to do it for him, though he'd have 5 to 6 different caregivers or nurses each day. Other caregivers would tell me that he sometimes would speak to his deceased father or ask to visit his still living mother. As months went on, the staff and his care team adjusted his medication to address the unusual behavior. He was on some very heavy comfort medications, and they were decreased. Because he was not communicative with words, I was always quiet and observing his eyes or what body language I could detect. I noticed beginning in the afternoons with dinner, he would be very focused on the meal. He needed me to feed him by mouth and coach him through swallowing problems. Occasionally he would dramatically break attention, look down the dark hallway towards his bedroom, and mouth words out that I couldn't discern. It gave me a chill, and after redirecting a few times, he would ignore me. I'd say, "Who's out there? Who are you talking to?" And he'd finish, look over at me, and continue eating. Eventually he began to speak to me. We became very close, we nearly shared a birthday, and I went above and beyond to try and make him feel truly like a friend of mine. I assumed he was talking to his dad those times at dinner, and that's what the other caregivers meant. Lots of strange things would happen with his condition, things he wasn't supposed to do. He'd miraculously throw an object with precision into a garbage can in the bathroom across from his bedroom, from a wheelchair, and be incapacitated. But that only added to my wonder. One night he was in bed. I was watching from a baby monitor and noticed he was thrashing in bed and gasping for air. Again, unusual for his condition. If anyone's seen The Skeleton Key, it felt a bit like the scenes with the older man. I ran into the room, comforted him, and asked what was wrong. He said very clearly while staring at the ceiling, "I'm scared." He wouldn't look at me, only the ceiling. I held his hand and said the Lord's Prayer and Hail Mary. He calmed down, turned his head, looked me in the face and asked me, "Who is John?" I froze because, though it is a common name, John wasn't a caregiver that worked with us, a family member, or a specialty therapist. Nothing came to mind. I searched all the people he knows, and I couldn't think of anyone. I didn't respond to him because the only John the First could think of was my deceased ex-boyfriend, and I had another strangeness occur after his death. I continued to work with this client as long as I could before I had to move far away. It was a magical experience that I believe taught me a lot about life but left me with more questions unanswered. I work a night shift at a 1920s mental hospital. Bear with me, the details are important. Obviously, countless people have died here for various reasons. There have been incidents of hangings, murder/suicide, beatings, accidental overdoses, and electroshock therapy, among others. There are 4 floors, with the 4th floor being the well-known hotspot for paranormal activity. Me being security, I have to check it out every once in a while. The 4th floor is essentially an extremely long hallway, approx. 1,800 steps, with housing units on both sides throughout. Each unit has a 5-inch thick steel door, and there's a window at the very end of the hall. They don't house patients due to the fact that the county took over a while before I started, and it's completely empty by the time the 3rd shift rolls around. The 4th floor is also the only floor in the entire complex that is completely off the ground due to the complex being built into a hill. It is also where the electroshock therapy took place a long time ago. This occurrence happened last week Wednesday on the 3rd shift. I wanted to do a walk through the 4th floor that night around 3 a.m. for no other reason than I was feeling brave. I walk all the way down the 4th floor to the window. Eventually, as I got closer, I started seeing that the window obviously needs cleaning. When I got about 5 feet away, all of a sudden there was a handprint that would have been extremely noticeable from even 15 feet away. Looked at the handprint, turned around, said nope, and walked back down the hall. On my way back from the window, I peek into a side office area with my flashlight just to look. Nothing, kept going. After a couple seconds, it sounded like someone was running up behind me, so I walked even faster because everything in my body said not to turn around. As I kept walking, I passed by a unit, and as I passed, I heard what sounded like someone punching the door. Put it up to paranoia due to the running I heard prior, that is, until I passed another unit. Another loud thud, as if someone punched the door. So at this point I start speed walking down the hall, and while I hear footsteps following mine. Mind you, these units are not connected at all, and the entire floor is entirely empty. That's just one of my experiences. I have also been having dreams of a white, skinny woman in a hospital gown who has black hair with bangs in her face. I always thought she was just a reoccurring person in my dreams until I talked with one of the CNAs that worked tonight in the kids unit. I never brought her up to the CNA, we were just talking about ghosts, and she said that numerous people have said that they've seen the exact woman I just explained. I explained to the CNA in detail about how she looked in my dreams, and she just went pale with her mouth hung open. Supposedly, this ghost is extremely well known throughout the hospital by various people. People have seen her in mirrors, have been locked in bathrooms, and have observed her just walking around. But in my dreams she always just appears or runs up to me, grabs me, and screams in my face. There was this one dream in particular where I woke up from a dream to wake up in my duplex's stairway. I walk down the stairs, because that's where my bedroom is, and walk into my bedroom. Once in my bedroom, I see my bed, my fiancée sleeping on her side of the bed, and myself sleeping. In front of my closet, which is on my side of the bed, I see that same woman standing next to my body just staring at me. I walk up to her, and I get the courage to ask her just who the hell she is. She looks at me, grabs me, screams in my face, then shoves me onto my bed, which is when I officially woke up at 3:15 a.m. I have no clue who this woman is at all, but I still dream about her every now and then. Every single dream is in a different place, but she's just there, and this has been going on since I started working at my job. Grocery store overnights. I worked as an overnight grocery stocker manager for 19 years. This happened about 15 years ago. We were working on one of the nights where we didn't have a load, just doing back stock. Once a week one of our meat department employees would stay late and do deep cleaning. It was Mary's turn this week. It was a bit after midnight when Mary came up to me in tears that all shook up. She was telling me there was a man all dressed in black standing in the meat department, motioning for her to go to him. I grabbed another one of my employees to go look for this guy. We looked everywhere but didn't see anyone. I reassured Mary we looked everywhere but didn't see anyone else in the store, but I still felt a bit uneasy about the whole thing. Our closing manager always does a walkthrough to make sure no one is left in the store. Mary went back to work but just a few minutes later came back up to me in panic mode, telling me he was back and motioning for her to come to him. Once again, we went looking around and didn't see anyone there. I told Mary she could go home and not worry about finishing her work. That morning, when the store manager came in, I was telling her what had happened. She pulled up the camera footage and saw nothing weird. She told me that Mary told her a story a few nights before about a customer with a knife. We just thought maybe it was just Mary having too much stress. The next night I went into work and was told Mary had passed away that morning. She went home from work, went to bed, and never woke up. It still runs through my head to this day, the weirdest thing that ever happened on my overnight shift. I want to start off by saying I don't know much about the paranormal. I believe that there's probably stuff out there. I've done a couple ghost tours, but I've never had anything happen that genuinely scared me or felt truly paranormal. I do in-home healthcare, and I work the overnight shift. Recently, I was placed in a new home. The house is a newly remodeled 3-bedroom house, but there's only one person living there currently, and I am able to sleep on shift. The first night I worked, I didn't sleep much. I cat-naped for a couple hours, mainly because it takes some time for me to adjust to new homes. I had an especially weird feeling here though and chalked it up to general anxiety. At around 4 a.m., the power went out in the home, and I was horrified. I froze, and I was completely overcome with anxiety. I'm not scared of the dark, I've never reacted like this before, but something felt wrong. After the lights went out, I heard what sounded like a door in the back of the house slamming. I tried to rationalize it. I went home, I forgot about it and returned to work. The next week or so was uneventful except for the feeling I got when I was inside the house. I am still to this day terrified of going down the hallway. The bathroom I am able to use is in this back room at the end of the hall, and I am terrified to go back there. I genuinely will not go down the hall unless it's an emergency. After a week passed, I started trying to actually sleep there. I sleep on the couch in the living room with a couple lights on and YouTube on the TV for background noise. It's very cozy and comfy. Except for having these nightmares. Every time I sleep at this house, I have nightmares. Not just normal nightmares. They feel so real. It almost always starts with me waking up on the couch, except for one time when I had a dream about being in this tiny town in Illinois that I had never once heard of, and when I googled it, a bunch of ghost stories popped up, so that's fun. But in my dreams, I always wake up on the couch, feeling sick to my stomach with anxiety. Sometimes I can move, sometimes I'm frozen. I hear whispers, someone talking to me. I never really remember what was said when I wake up. Or I'll see figures standing in front of me. Last night, when I had the dream, I was able to move. I stood up and walked down that hallway, and when I got to the back room, there was a body in a rocking chair, and they were like smiling at me and whispering something. I woke up in real life literally shaking, and I could have swore I heard a voice when I woke up, but I was too shaken up to know what was said. I asked my coworker this morning if they've ever experienced anything weird here, and apparently the 2 bedrooms had been previously occupied, and they both passed away last year. She said that sometimes cabinets open and there's weird noises. I don't have these dreams at home. I've never had dreams like this. And honestly, I'm terrified. I don't know if this is related to the clients that passed or if it's something else entirely. I have to go back there in an hour, and after last night, I was genuinely terrified to be there. Over the couple months I've worked at this house, the power has gone out multiple times a week. I hear noises throughout the night, and literally every time I sleep there, I have nightmares like this. I'm scared to tell someone IRL because I don't want them to think I'm actually crazy. I'm not sure if it's ghosts or something worse, maybe I'm going crazy, but I just needed to tell someone. Possible encounters from a Michigan nature park worker. For my safety, I do not want to reveal which park system I work for, but it is important to the story that I, F19, work a position at a Michigan nature park not entirely dissimilar to that of a park ranger. My job duties usually include manning the entry booth and locking up the buildings at night. And although not a usual duty, sometimes they ask me to walk or take a parked vehicle through some of the trails. As I am on the younger side but still have several years of experience at the park, I'm a relatively experienced outdoorsman. I've had some odd things happen to me while on the job that I can't quite explain. I'm decently well versed in some areas of the paranormal, and although not entirely relevant, it's worth noting that I'm also a Norse pagan as part of a family belief and often wear protective symbols as well. And to be honest, I've started wearing them more since these odd things have been happening. I've tried looking into it myself, but overall I'm overwhelmed and not sure where to look, so a friend suggested I ask a forum like this about my experiences. I have 2 specific questions I would like to ask. Thing 1. I usually work the night shift, and this night in particular it was raining a lot and the conditions were getting unsafe. I was posted out in the booth, which is multiple miles from the office, so when things took a turn for the worse, my boss radioed me back. Some people who don't spend a lot of time in the woods don't realize how dark deep woods can get, much less in the dark at night. But I had both a flashlight and the light from the booth, which gave me probably 30 feet of visibility. And when I went to grab my stuff so I could lock up the booth and get to my car, I swear I saw something that moved very human-like but moved in a really odd way, like the only way I can describe it is if a horse-deer hybrid tried to run like a person. But there were no people out there, and it was most definitely not a deer. I'm probably not describing it in the best way, but it was very off. So I got to my car ASAP, and it didn't start right away, a bit odd but not entirely out of character for my car, but when I turned the key a second time, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and it looked like whatever it was had gotten closer. The drive goes without incident, but I'm still off about what I saw, and when I get closer, I radio in to see if they need me to pick anyone up. And the radio doesn't work right, which was very out of character. These radios are designed to work in awful conditions, and I was the closest I'd been to any sort of signal in a while. I chalked it up to the weather and pulled into the office. But as I do, something runs past me. I did not get a good look at what it was, but it was not a person, and I'm telling you there's not an animal in that woods that I know of that looks like either of the things I saw. And I just can't seem to shake it. Thing 2. This happened more recently and is what prompted me to finally reach out to a forum of some kind. I was walking the trails for security purposes close to closing. We close around 11 p.m. and start a final walkthrough around 9 p.m. We do this to make sure no one's stuck on the trail or hurt, so they aren't stuck overnight when there's fewer staff and none that patrol those trails. So I was walking one of our trails, and I was pretty deep in the woods already, as I'm a fairly fast hiker, and this is a trail I know well. I was already about 2 miles into the trail when things started to get weird. I hear a noise off in the distance, and at first I thought it could be a coyote or an owl, so I pressed on. Coyotes stay off the trails, won't go after people unless they have dogs, and dogs are banned in the woods here, and they know when we do our sweeps, so I was not concerned. But then the noises got weirder. I'm used to the sounds of the woods, and I know the area and the wildlife very well, and I have never once in my life heard that sound before. It didn't come from any animal I recognize, and it most definitely was not human. I've never aborted a sweep before, even when I've had coyotes nearby, but it did not feel right, and I got out of there. We are allowed to use our judgment in these cases. If anyone has any idea what either of these things could be, please let me know. I really appreciate it. Encounter during nighttime security rounds at a museum. First off, I've always had a sensitivity to the paranormal. Odd premonition dreams, seeing shadow figures now and again, knowing when a spirit doesn't want me in an area, etc. I used to work at the Natural History and Art Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as a night security guard. The history portion was built in the early 1900s, with the adjacent music hall being built in the late 1800s. For the almost 3 years I worked there, I've always felt that something was always around, even though the museum was closed and empty as I did my rounds. On one of my rounds in the natural history portion, I went to exit an office room when I felt like I bumped into something. Immediately afterwards, a female voice said hello in a surprised manner. A little shaken, I checked the surrounding area in the hopes of debunking it. Nobody around but me. As I continued my rounds, I decided to ask if the spirit needed help or just wanted to chat. The flashlight I had on, which you had to twist to get from low to high to SOS, went from low to SOS and back 3 times while in my hand. Thinking that was a yes, I decided to chat with it and try to help whomever this was. The whole round took over an hour. 30 minutes of it were spent chatting with the spirit that followed me around after the first encounter in that office. During that time, my flashlight did the low to SOS thing multiple times, which eventually drained what was a full battery. By the time my round ended, I felt whatever was around me dissipate. Sometimes, being sensitive to the paranormal stinks. When encounters like this happen, though, it makes it worthwhile. So I was helping this lady write a resume oriented toward getting work as night watch security. She had plenty of experience, and she said she preferred building patrolling on night shifts. With the caveat that she refuses any job working nights at the Minneapolis Armory. This beautiful old auditorium in downtown Minneapolis was done up in 1930s Federal-style Art Deco. The Dead Kennedys played there on tour in the early 1980s. The Armory played host to other events occasionally, but it spent decades empty, gorgeous and historical, decaying and unused. Prince made a stir a few years before he died because he signed on to buy and restore the White Elephant property. So this major security company had the contract to patrol the property and watch out for incursions of copper plumbing thieves, squatters, vandals, and junkies. The security lady was newly hired early in her career and was assigned solo night patrol at the Armory. It was creepy enough walking the poorly lit corridors all alone, sweeping the auditorium with her flashlight. But every so often, patrolling upper floors, she would hear a woman's blood-curdling scream in the middle of the night. It would be muffled quite a bit by the intervening floors, a fact that underlined its ear-splitting volume at its source, so much that it would still be audible upstairs. The first time this happened was the worst. The new guard reported it to base and kept in walkie-talkie contact as she circled the grounds and parking lots. Although the scream sounded like it had come through the floor, she imagined it must have been a woman getting assaulted, kidnapped, or murdered outside. At that time, there were no bars or nightclubs open within many blocks. The patrol outside showed no signs of any living person. No peep of noise from bargoers or night-roving homeless. The part of downtown around the Armory was a ghost town in many ways. No signs of entry or exit anywhere around the building, either. All doors and windows intact, locked, blocked, and/or barred. So the guard went back inside to check the basement. Base was disconcertingly blasé, as she reported in on the walkie. They approved her action. She thought crackheads might have broken in there, and one was being assaulted by the others. Of all the areas in the Armory she had to patrol, she hated the basement most of all. The basement was a musty labyrinth of cramped corridors filled with stained, asbestos-wrapped pipes running along the low ceilings. There was absolutely no trace of anyone down there. Base wasn't surprised and gave her crackling, staticky approval to stay watchful but continue her patrol duty upstairs the rest of the night. When that happens, it usually happens only once, and then it's quiet the rest of the shift, said Base. The basement scream happened again, every few weeks. The guard did a due diligence investigation of the lower depths each time, but she never found anything. A different assignment finally opened up, and after 6 months of the Armory, She was ecstatic to transfer to a boring watch of a normal office building across town. On her last night at the armory, Base told her how impressed the supervisor was that she stuck it out for 6 months. Of all the security officers in the company, she, the only woman guard in that cohort, had braved the notorious assignment the longest. I used to be one of the nighttime duty managers at a hotel. The hotel consists of the main house, which was built in the late 90s/early 2000s, and the old house, which was built in the 14th century. There are a few spooky stories about the old house and the grounds, which all come from actual events. At one point it was listed as the third most haunted building in Britain. I wouldn't say that I was a believer or a denier of ghost stories. I thought some events could be explained and some couldn't. Being a local, I was familiar with all the stories, and my dad had worked there for years when I started. Like I say, I wasn't a believer and wasn't a denier. That was until I became a duty manager. Being a duty manager is a simple enough role, dealing with complaints from hotel guests, handing over to the next duty manager, etc. One of my duties as a nighttime duty manager was to lock up areas of both parts of the hotel, places like the bar, restaurant, and gift shop. Other things, such as making sure fire doors are closed, that emergency lighting is working, and closing and locking windows for security. This part of the job was extensive: every window, fire door, and emergency lighting. I had to check this every single night. Now, the old house is where all the spooky stuff happens. In the old house is a chapel, pretty standard for a house of that size and age in Britain. This is where I experienced the first spooky thing. There is one window in the chapel that, no matter how many times you close and lock that window, the next time you walk past, it'll be open again. This was experienced by myself, the other duty managers, and even the security guards. Nothing horrifying, but it gets worse. The next spot is a set of stairs called the Jerusalem staircase, named so as the wood for the stairs comes from Jerusalem. Some stories about a ghost dog on these stairs that trip people up. I don't think anything of this. It's stairs, people trip on them all the time. However, they lead to a room called the Long Gallery. Now this is a very long room, close to 100 meters. Other than the length, there is nothing else to the room. I was doing my rounds one night and had come in to do my checks as normal when suddenly I could hear heavy footsteps coming from the other side of the room, which is possible. There are guest rooms at the other end. I shine my torch down the room and can see nothing. Then it gets scary. The footsteps slowly become harder and faster until they sound like someone sprinting towards me. I am frozen. Next thing I know, whack, I've been shoved against the wall with pain in my back, stomach, and chest like I've been tackled. There is a similar room directly above, but that is only accessible to duty managers and security. Again, not the only person to experience this. The last couple relates to a confirmed murder in the house. Landlord of the house and his wife are expecting a baby. Lord has heard a rumor that wife had an affair. Had a local nurse abducted and brought to the house to deliver the baby. Baby was then snatched by the Lord, thrown into the fire, and ended his wife. Nurse escapes and curses the family, saying no male heir will be born to the family. The curse kind of came true. No male heir has survived long after birth. Now the bedroom where these events took place is a popular part of the old house, with guests visiting all the time. However, it's not the real room. That's directly above. I have been in the room more times than I can count. Reports of a crying baby are common but never proved. One thing never reported was blood dripping from the ceiling. As mentioned, the real bedroom is directly above, so myself and security investigated. We found nothing, nobody, not even a drop of blood. The second part is about a sculpture in the chapel of one of the male heirs that died shortly after birth as a result of the curse. The sculpture is pretty normal looking, a baby in cloth with its eyes closed. Apart from one night, the eyes were open. I ran so fast out of that chapel, I'm pretty sure I broke the land speed record. So there's my experience. The hotel, if you are interested, is called Littlecote House Hotel. Old job, worked in a dementia hospice nursing home. We had regular cleaning and cook prep tasks as well as doing rounds to check on residents. Well, there were always rumors of a few rooms being haunted. Considering how many people have died there, it wouldn't be surprising. I was alone in one of the wings doing rounds, and I was walking room to room. When I was halfway between rooms, I heard a man ask me, "Where am I?" Behind me, and when I turned around, I saw a glimpse of a silhouette towering over me. I was scared shitless. It might have been the lack of pre-work naps, but I swear to God I knew I heard the man's voice. Other coworkers also reported voices during the night shift. I've seen doors close themselves in empty rooms, no wind draft and the doors were heavy. The outside doors are also alarm set. If the door opens, an alarm goes off, alerting the nurses/RAs. Well, one outside door alarm kept going off one night. After the door was checked and reset twice, we finally decided to just unplug the alarm and keep it dead bolted. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, the alarm went off again even though it was unplugged. I kept a cross on me under a friend recommendation in my scrubs. But that was the creepiest night shift job I've ever had to handle. I'm not going to go into the ghost gropes. I just graduated from boot camp. While I was there, some strange things happened that me and some other recruits could not explain, and I've come here to look for some answers. Here's the story. When you are in boot camp, you have to stand watch occasionally for a few hours. Usually, my shift began at night. Me and my partner usually stood watch from midnight to around 2 a.m. My job was usually roving security, which is basically the person who patrols a set area and takes temperature readings and looks for suspicious activity, etc. Usually the most serious things I dealt with were other recruits messing around in the bathrooms and telling them to go back to their bunks. One night around 2 in the morning, I was making my rounds and thought I heard talking coming from the bathroom. I went inside and heard whispering coming from the showers, so I walked towards them, and what I saw was just weird. I saw a young man around 17 to 20 years old hunched over, facing away from me in the darkest corner of the shower area. I walked towards him and said, "Hey man, I need you to get back to your bunk," and as I was approaching him, I swear he vanished into thin air in the blink of an eye. I remember the feeling of pure shock and confusion. When I walked out, the other guy on watch asked me why I was so pale, and I told him what happened. I told him exactly what I had seen, and he said it was most likely a result of me being tired from all the stress of boot camp and the lack of sleep. I agreed with him because I figured why would a ghost haunt a shower at boot camp of all places, and I was pretty tired that night. The next night I did not have watch, but the recruit who had my usual shift reported seeing a shadow in the showers and some weird whispering noises while there was nobody there. I talked to him and told him what I had seen and that it was most likely our minds playing tricks on us because we are all tired. He agreed, and we decided that we should just ignore it. That was until I started seeing things outside the showers. I had a slightly earlier watch that night, and I was patrolling the bunks, checking on recruits who were sick as I'm supposed to. I was walking past some empty bunks and saw some movement in the corner of my eye. I figured it was some recruit messing around, so I go to tell them to go back to bed, but as I approach the empty bunks, I see some kind of shadowy figure that did not look humanoid to me. It was like a black blob moving around. When I investigated, it vanished. The area it was in was frigid compared to the rest of the room. I just walked away as there was nothing to do there and figured that the staff must have cranked the air conditioning and I was just tired making stuff up. I saw this out of the corner of my eye all throughout boot camp while on the early morning watch. The last story for me was from when I was tasked with taking temperatures throughout the whole building. My job was to go to each division's compartment and ask for their room temperature. I had just taken all but 2 other division temperatures and was looking for the last 2. As I walked past some empty rooms, I could have sworn I saw movement inside, so I figured maybe I missed a room and went to look inside their window. The room was just being used as storage and was pitch black except for the light from outside. All I could see were some boxes and empty bunks, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw a person standing at the edge of the light facing me. I saw this and decided I was just going to look elsewhere for the last 2 rooms, which I found a few minutes later. However, as I was returning to turn in my readings, I noticed in the hallway a shadowy arm or limb being outstretched and coming back behind a doorway, and when I passed, there was nothing, but the area it was in was super cold, and the room was just a closed janitorial closet. The other recruit I previously mentioned spoke about seeing somebody dancing in the showers at night, but there was nothing when he investigated. He also said that one night he passed by the showers and saw someone peek out and disappear behind the wall, and there was nobody there when he investigated, but he noted the area was really cold. I know I am going to get called a liar and attention seeker, but I know these are all true. I am simply trying to find out what kind of entity I and that recruit may have been dealing with. Also, I cannot disclose much information as I do not want to get in trouble with the chain of command. During the years 1995 and 2005, I worked at a language school and witnessed events there that defy human explanation. I usually say that there are people who have a glow that goes far beyond their physical beauty. There is something about a person that commands respect, people who have a strong presence of spirit. I don't know how to explain it very well. And Susanna was one of those people, a beautiful girl with curly hair and a charming smile. Susanna's smile was the school's calling card when it was first starting out. Always very kind, smiling, and helpful. But in life, not everything is rosy. Susanna met a boy and started dating him, and this boy, who was already a drug user, led her down the same path. She had not worked at the school for 3 years, and during that time, she became depressed, and unfortunately, She took her own life. It was incredibly sad when we found out. It was hard to imagine that such a nice girl would attempt to take her own life. However, I cannot fail to report what I heard and witnessed. I cannot fail to mention that, after Susanna's terrible death, at least 4 secretaries who worked at night and had their dinner break in a kitchen at the back of the school, 3 reported, more than once, having felt the presence of someone in the kitchen with them. To the point that some, without the knowledge of the school owner, had dinner in the reception area, afraid to go to the kitchen at night. But the phenomenon that happened to the 4th secretary gives me goosebumps just remembering it. It was the end of the year, the school was already empty. I was with Ingrid at the reception area around 8:30 p.m. Since it was the end of the year, there was a festive atmosphere, and because it was a Friday, we collected money and bought some S-Fias. The only people at the school were me as the manager, Ingrid as the secretary, Johnny as the pedagogical coordinator, and Wagner, the security guard. Since Ingrid had been sorting the students' report cards, she said she would have dinner later. At 8:30 p.m., she went down that dark hallway toward the kitchen. It is essential to remember that Ingrid had only been at the school for 6 or 7 months, and what had happened to Susanna was a matter that only I and the principal knew about, but no one else. 2 minutes later, I heard the sound of Ingrid's heels running quickly, and she opened the door that limited access to that hallway. She was catatonic. Terrifyingly scared. I even joked with her, "Ingrid, it's like you saw a ghost." When I realized that she had started to cry and sob, she said to me, "Get my bag from the back, I'm going to leave, I'm not feeling well." I insisted and said, "Wait a minute, I need you to tell me what happened, because if the owner of the school calls here and asks for you, what will I say?" Then she calmed down and began to tell me, "Look, I don't know your religion, but I'm a spiritualist. And you can laugh all you want at what I'm going to say, but I saw the spirit of a woman in the kitchen." And she burst into tears again. Then I asked her, "Ingrid, could it be a teacher who came to bring a book? We always ask teachers to return teaching materials at the end of the semester?" And it was at that moment that this speaker got goosebumps when Ingrid described the woman she saw. "We don't have any teachers over 1.75 meters tall with curly hair, or did a new teacher come in?" Well, at that moment I felt compelled to tell Ingrid Susanna's story, and then we both started to cry, lamenting Susanna's sad ending. I asked the security guard to stay at the reception, and I went with Ingrid to the principal's locker, because that was where we kept the photos of past events and where we would probably have a photo of Susanna. Very carefully, so as not to mess up my boss's locker, I found the first photo albums from the school's first Halloween parties, and I didn't have to look through them very much to find Susanna's photo. When Ingrid saw the photo, she burst into tears again, grabbed her purse, and left sobbing. The following Monday, Ingrid quit her job at school. I never heard from Ingrid again. I work as an operator and shift manager in an incineration plant for chemical waste. A few months into the job, some of my coworkers told me that sometimes weird things happen in our department. What they meant is that sometimes you can hear footsteps near you or see a shadowy figure around a corner. Sounds interesting, right? Well, they had a pretty logical explanation for this. We not only use the incineration plant for chemical waste in the form of liquids like solvent, but we also burn away the toxic fumes that our other departments produce. A month ago I had night shift, and my coworker for the night was sick, so I was alone. 99% of the night shifts nothing happens, and you just make 2 inspection tours through the plant to get some data and see if there are issues. So I didn't think much about being alone, even when it was my first time alone in this company. I was even happy because I planned to watch a movie. So I am here at the night shift and making my first inspection tour. Nothing unusual until I need to get some data from the basement. I go downstairs and walk to the sensors for the data. Suddenly I hear a creaking sound from behind me and footsteps walking down the metal stairs. I turn around but don't see a thing, of course. But I am a bit curious. Why? These stairs are sturdy as duck. One of my coworkers is pretty obese, and when he walked down this staircase, they didn't make the same loud noise I heard just now. So whatever it was that made this sound needed to be 370 plus pounds. I come to the conclusion that this must be hallucinations made by these fumes, so I decide to continue my tour and then turn on the AC for later. During this tour, I also saw a shadowy figure at one corner, but I still thought, nah. Just the fumes. As I return to the control room, I turn on the AC in the basement to get rid of any fumes. 4 hours later, I make my second and final inspection tour. Like before, everything is normal. Then comes the basement. I still shake a bit while remembering this. I walk down again, AC turned on, remember, so usually no fumes, and as I walk down, I can hear footsteps again directly behind me. I turn around, but nothing to see. I then continue to go to the sensors, and suddenly I hear footsteps again. But this time not walking, but running. I turn around in a flash, and I can see a shadow just in time as it goes around the corner. I am a bit shaken, but I hurriedly collected the data and want to go back up and just leave the basement alone for tonight. As I walk upstairs again, I hear this charging footstep again. But this time from two directions. One from behind and one from upstairs. I have enough and charge upstairs myself. As I reach the top of the stairs, I slightly turn around and only see a massive shadow halfway up the stairs. I run back to the control room and shut the door. Then I remember. I had the AC turned on. That means there shouldn't be any fume concentration high enough to cause this kind of hallucinations. I shake. This time for real. I stand up and ponder if I should check the AC downstairs or wait it out. As I stand before the door to leave the control room, I hear footsteps behind me. Quiet footsteps, but definitely footsteps. I make my decision to not be a hero and just wait for the next shift. Later, the next shift comes, and I tell them about my night shift. They laugh it off and tell me that probably the AC was shitty again. I laugh with them and agree, even though I don't completely agree with the argument of a broken AC. The next 2 days I have a weekend, and I forget about it. Then the next Monday I arrive for my early shift, and I chat a bit with the guys from the night shift. My experience comes up again, and I begin to laugh like a few days ago, but my coworkers didn't. I ask them why. Well. As it turned out, the AC was completely fine. But what made my experience really scary was something else. Our neighboring department, which produces these fumes, wasn't running. Because of a lack of customers this year, they didn't have all the lines active for the year, and at my night shift, they had all production lines turned off. That means they could never produce these fumes, which means whatever I saw there weren't hallucinations caused by the fumes but something else. Whatever I saw and heard in that basement was real. No hallucinations like many experienced all the time. No, I just had experienced something that scared everyone. My coworkers are now also cautious of the basement, and the manager of the incineration plant reported this to the higher-ups. They started an investigation 2 weeks ago, but till now they didn't find a logical cause for how these noises and shadows were created and neither found a solution. They now plan to repair these pipes ASAP, and in the next week we will install cameras and sensors to find out what happens in the basement. Thank you for listening. I had this experience about 5 years ago in Death Valley, California, during a military training exercise. My unit was conducting our month-long pre-deployment training at NTC, the National Training Center, and we were 2 weeks into it, and it was roughly day 3 of 7 of our actual field exercise, or field, as most U.S. military personnel call it. For those that don't know, the field is when you actually go out into the training grounds and simulate combat and train as if you were really deployed. This helps your unit to be prepared for the real deal. No sleeping, lots of physical labor, getting attacked, and whatnot. It really is an awful, but also fun time all around. Like I mentioned, it was about day 3 or so, and my platoon was positioned several kilometers from the action/front, as we were an artillery unit, so we were relatively safe from any enemies where we were. During the day we were busy providing artillery fire for our friends and moving every so often to prevent being pinpointed by the enemy, but as night came our forces halted their offensive, and so we weren't receiving any missions, and we weren't changing positions. This break in action and movement finally gave us time to get some well-deserved rest before we had to get back at it again in the morning. We couldn't all just sleep at once for security and to be ready in case a call for support came in, so we all took turns pulling guard duty, which cycled through everybody, allowing everyone a couple hours of rest while maintaining readiness. I had been up for over 72 hours at that point, with a little 10-minute nap here and there. I remember being 4th on guard, so that gave me roughly 4 hours of sleep. I decided to sleep on top of our rucksacks in the back of a Humvee trailer, as it was the only place to lie down. It was not comfortable, but as soon as my head was down, I was fast asleep. 4 hours later, my squadmate woke me up for my guard shift, and I swear it felt like I had just fallen asleep. I was mad, but once I got up, I was surprisingly awake and refreshed. I grabbed my gear and headed for our vehicle. We were using a M992, which is a big, tracked ammo carrier, as a command vehicle. It has a hatch on the top that you sit in and look out of, and from there, you are sitting 12 or so feet off the ground. It gives a nice 360 view. We also had night vision goggles up there to see, as it is super dark in the desert at night. All in all, a pretty nice setup. This is where my experience happened. It was about 20 minutes in, and I was enjoying looking at the stars, the mountains, and the beauty of the desert at night through the night vision goggles. As I was looking around, something in the distance caught my eye. At first I saw movement, but when I focused the night vision on the area, I noticed something strange. Initially, I thought it was a trash bag or tarp blowing in the wind, but the more I got the night vision focused, the better I could make it out. It appeared to be a cloaked figure, walking towards me at about 200 to 300 meters away. It looked like a stereotypical depiction of the Grim Reaper. I could see a hood, but no face underneath. It even had one arm out to the side like it was holding something, but I couldn't see anything in its hand. Then I realized it wasn't walking, it was disappearing and reappearing farther ahead. It appeared as if it was teleporting 3 or so meters ahead every second. It honestly looked like someone was lagging in a video game, but in real life. It would also occasionally teleport a few meters to the left or right, so it wasn't walking in a straight line. I even rubbed my eyes and looked away and then back, and it was still there, silently moving through the barren sand dunes. I was scared and completely confused. My brain raced to come up with an answer as to what it was I was witnessing. Before I could think of a rational explanation, I moved my eyes away and back one more time, and it suddenly disappeared. I tried looking all around me, but it was gone. The whole event lasted maybe a few minutes. I didn't want to sound like I was crazy, so I didn't say anything. Anyways, when you get back from the field at NTC, you go to a mock base called Ruba to put all your equipment away and load it on trains to be shipped back along with your vehicles to your home base elsewhere in the country. During this time I learned that every time a unit goes to NTC, at least one person dies during the training rotation. No one had died while we were in the field, which is the dangerous part and what most people do. It was smooth sailing from there, so everyone was kind of relieved thinking we would go home safe for once. However, a soldier from another unit died in Ruba when we got back from a traumatic accident, and I was part of a group that involuntarily volunteered to clean up the mess that was left behind. I was so upset, but luckily it was just bloody bandages and medical supplies, but sad and creepy nonetheless. After the cleanup, I was thinking about my experience again, and part of me believed what I saw somehow correlated to the death, because the whole Grim Reaper thing. I still honestly don't know what to think of what I saw that night. I have never seen anything like that before or since. There were no friends near where I saw it, and the nearest unit was kilometers away at the time. I highly doubt one person would have just walked out in the desert away from everyone else, and like I said, we were far from the enemy. I also can't explain the sudden vanishing of the figure either, as the desert is empty and barren, so there is nothing to hide behind, and I would have seen something or someone lying down. I was alert, not tired because I got to sleep, not hungry, and hydrated. I don't think it was my eyes playing tricks on me either. It's been on my mind for a long time, and I just wanted to finally share my story with people. Maybe someone can give me an explanation. Thoughts and feedback are more than welcome. I work in a hospital as a nurse. I was on a row of nights, which I dreaded. I ended up having 5 patients, 2 of whom were under care for cancer. There are 2 events in here from 2 separate nights. 1. The night started normally, as I assessed and passed medications to the patients and did my charting and other night duties, stocking, and other stuff. Just around 11 p.m., one of my palliative patients started ringing, complaining that there was a kid running into the room laughing and playing when they should be in bed. I checked the room to make sure there was no one in the room and reassured him that there were no children in the hospital area we were in. I made him comfortable and left the room. He rang again, and I went back to the room to see what he rang for. Agitated, he said that he was just looking to rest comfortably and that people should keep their children under control and not let them jump on his bed playing and laughing. This time, I got the chills, but again, I reassured him that there were no children since it wasn't the pediatric ward. I told him that I would bring him a sleeping pill to help him fall asleep but that I would be a few minutes. I started walking back towards the desk and medication room to grab the sleeping pill. A bell rang. I turned around and saw that the indicator above his door was flashing. Slightly annoyed, I walked back to his room. He was agitated in his bed, and I asked him what was wrong. He again complained about this kid. He said he was just in here again. I leaned over the bed and calmly explained, "There are no children in this hospital, you need to get some rest." He replied loudly, "He is standing right behind you." I stood straight up instantly and slowly turned around. Creeped out, I turned to face the patient, and before I could speak, he said, "He ran into the closet," referring to the lockers where patients can store items. I slowly opened the locker and saw that his jacket was swinging, but no one was in there. I turned and said, "There is no one in here." I rushed into the med room to give him a sleeping pill. 2. This will be a short one. I came out of one of my patient rooms and was sanitizing my hands but facing the wall. As I was rubbing my hands together, I noticed a shadow of something walk out of the room next door, and it walked into the room across from it as I turned to see. I went into the room where it walked, and I asked the patient, who was not mine, if anyone came into the room. She replied no, but with a shaky voice. I checked the room to make sure there was no one in there. I left that room and went into the room where it came from. I looked around, but no one was in there. I checked the patient, again, not assigned to me, and found that he had died. He was palliative. I walked out of the room immediately to inform the nurse who had the patient that he had died. She asked me to come with her to check on the patient because she had been having creepy vibes every time she went in there. I agreed, and we went. She did the assessment where you listen for a full minute. When she was done, we heard knocking on the wall. She said, "See, it's creepy." I didn't think anything of it until she said, "We are on the 4th floor, and on the other side of that wall is the outside of the building." We quickly left the room. 4 of us came in there to shroud the body. A few years ago, I was a CNA, certified nursing assistant. I worked at a nursing home and had a few encounters there, but nothing prepared me for everything that would happen when I started working at a hospice home. It essentially is where people go to die. People that are sick and don't have a lot of time. The facility was amazing and worked quick on getting people in. The point is a lot of people passed away in the building, and a lot when I was working, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I always opened the window in the residence room after someone passed away, my way of freeing the spirit so they wouldn't be trapped. No one else, unfortunately, did this. On to the main point. We have 2 wings of the building, and each wing has a huge linen closet. Tons of sheets, blankets, comforters, towels, washcloths, gowns, etc. When you open the door, both walls are lined with racks filled with linen. You can walk down into the room a couple hundred feet and turn to the right, and it's a little area where extra stuff is stored, things for a bed bath, and hygiene things for the residents. You are completely hidden when you are in the area on the right. A resident woke up around midnight and wanted to get cleaned up, so I was going to give them a bed bath. I went into the linen closet and headed to the area on the right and was grabbing soap, a toothbrush, toothpaste, a little basin, and other things. I heard the linen closet door open and close. We have 1 CNA and 1 RN on each wing during the night shift. I figured it was the nurse or the CNA for the other side. Sometimes we grab each other if we need help. I then heard a female voice. "Hello? I'm just grabbing stuff for a bath. Do you need help?" I answered, figuring it was the nurse. "I'm so cold. I can bring you a blanket, maybe I'll throw it in the dryer again like last week." I laugh. I turn around and head to walk back down the main area of the linen closet, and nobody is there. I didn't hear the door open again, so no one left, and there is no place to hide. I then feel someone grab my shoulder. I scream and drop everything as I turn around so quickly, and of course nobody is there. I ran out of there so fast. I tried to tell the nurse, but I wasn't making any sense until I calmed down. She stuck by my side the rest of the night. I didn't go back into the linen closet that night. When they grabbed me, it felt like it touched my bare skin, and it was so cold. This was one instant of so many encounters I experienced. 2 years ago, I was responsible for the protection and safeguarding of a large museum in Hesse, Germany. Alright. I loved it. Day shifts and the late shift were always such a blast. Ensure everyone has left. Play loud music through the announcement system. As told, such a joy. But there were also night shifts. And to be honest, I always had a talent to see things. A good friend of mine, later involved in this story, called this the third eye or second face. So off to another night shift in this huge house full to the brim with weird stuff. The first thing me and my buddy discovered was the Mermelkop, mumbling head. It was a small space in the outer roof maintenance walkway that was pitch black, and I mean pitch black. TBH, we didn't want to shine a torch in there, if it just was a blank space. Where were the noises coming from? And it always sounded like a man talking but very muffled. But sometimes you could hear words, nothing ominous, always was trivial stuff like, and, here, well, and so on. But the craziest thing was in a building part called Treasure Chamber. On day while making my rounds, the feeling of being watched, old paintings anywhere, was stronger than normal while I watched the treasures. I scanned the checkpoint badge and walked towards the last door in this room to scan the badge behind. There was something weird on my way because, at a particular painting, it looked like invisible tents were dancing around the area I wanted to pass. Nope. I walked backwards, facing the scene, until I was at the elevator and went to the security center. My brother was quite confused as to why I was so pale. FYI, I'm a huge guy. People say to me that I look like a human tank, so he wanted to know what happened. I told him this story, and suddenly he went completely white. A, you saw it too? B, come on, Buddy. Don't mess with me. I'm real man. I was walking past this image and was always looking at the picture directly. But the last time I wasn't watching there, I had the feeling something was holding me by my shoulder, and it let go at the moment I watched the rider. It was a picture of a grim-looking man on a huge black horse colored all red and black. Well. FK, man. I refused to inspect this room. And so I went off on my round. Nothing more special happened this night. Just the normal stuff. Intruder alert, inside a room, nobody could really enter from outside. They fixed this damn thing nearly 10 times. Still happened only at night. Sometimes the announcement system started to play the recorded message at 3 a.m. Nobody entered the command. And the everlasting feeling of, you are not alone in there. But. Totally would do it again. It was creepy, but good money and whole load of learning. Plus, I saw the real stuff inside the labs. 25 years old, and I still love dinosaurs. Thanks for listening. And yes, all of that is true. I've been a CNA for 6 years and have had lots of paranormal experiences during the night shift. Between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. The first place I worked, I got call lights in a room where someone had recently passed away. I was the only person working in that part of the building, and when I got to the room, it was locked like usual. When I unlocked it and went in, the cord on the wall was pulled and needed to be reset, but no one was in there. That same place had an activity room with a couple armchairs and a couch. I was laying on the couch one night, playing on my phone, and had my pager sitting next to me. It suddenly flew off the couch so fast, like someone had smacked it as hard as they could. That same place also had a basement that had motion detecting lights in all the rooms. I walked into the first room to grab something, and when I walked back out, every single room in the hallway had the lights on. You could also always hear people running up and down the halls or across the ceiling, but if you went to investigate, no one was ever there. The scariest time was when I was working a bunch of double shifts and decided to take a nap in the break room in the basement during my lunch break. I had sleep paralysis where I was stuck on the couch, and there was an old man in the corner of the room watching me but keeping his face hidden from me. I tried to move and get away and managed to break free and run out of the room a couple times only to suddenly appear back on the couch. However, the second my break ended at 30 minutes, I was suddenly able to move. I sat up, and as soon as I did, the lights went out. They were on a timer and should have turned off after 5 minutes, but they stayed on the entire time until my break had ended, as if they had detected the person in the corner the whole time. The last crazy thing that I experienced was at a new center I was working at. I would always hear doors opening and slamming shut or a lady's voice yelling at the end of the hallway, "Is anybody here?" But when I'd check all the rooms, everyone would be asleep in their beds. At that same facility, I went into a room to help someone use the bathroom. When I got him sat up on the edge of his bed, I had him grab my arms, and I said, "I'm going to help you stand up, so we can use the toilet real fast, okay?" And a woman right behind me, almost as if she were leaning over my right shoulder, said, "Okay," in reply. Obviously, no one was there. I know experiences like this aren't uncommon at these facilities. Does anyone have similar experiences? I work at a restaurant in a small town, and I have been locking up at the end of the night for over a year now. It's nice easy money, and I usually get paid an extra hour while doing simple tasks like cleaning or rolling silverware. It's actually calming after a hectic night in the kitchen. I never check bathrooms or anything before locking up. Usually the restaurant is empty well before I am finished and I have a lot of time to myself. There is something so eerie about being in a restaurant alone after closing. What was once a bustling place full of people is now empty and silent. The sounds of the machinery kicking on can be heard across the restaurant. The sound of the ice machine dumping ice usually makes me jump. With the layout for the restaurant, the main light switches are on the opposite side of the restaurant from the door with the alarm. So I usually lock the back and front doors and then turn off all the lights. Then I make my way through the dark restaurant to the side door, which has the keypad. In order to arm the system, all doors need to be closed, and there needs to be no movement in the restaurant. If there is an error, it will tell me the door that is open, or infrared, and the area where there is movement. When I first started locking up, I needed the flashlight on my phone to navigate to the door. But now I know the layout, so I just walk in the darkness. For some reason it is less scary to just speed walk through the dark than to have a dimly lit phone light casting shadows and reflecting off surfaces. I hate to say it as a grown man, the dark creeps me out. Tonight the restaurant had been closed for almost 2 hours. I mopped the kitchen, cleaned a bit and rolled some silverware for the morning crew. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, then made my way through the dark restaurant to the door. I typed in the code, and I get an error. Error, infrared detected, dining room. I felt my stomach sink. I know I've been alone in this restaurant for 2 hours. I know I had just walked through that pitch-black dining room. Just then I heard footsteps pounding on the tile coming towards me from the dining room. I've gotten chills down my spine before when something creeps me out. But this was different. It felt like my entire nervous system was overloaded. I didn't even turn around, I just opened the door and bolted out into the parking lot. I didn't hear any footsteps behind me. I got in my car and peeled out. I drove down the street and called 911 and then my boss. I waited until they arrived before I went back to the restaurant. The door was wide open. There was no sign of anyone. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken. I reported on what happened, and that was it. The only interior camera that is pointed at the cash registers doesn't see into a majority of the dining room, but the exterior camera caught something that scared the shit out of me and that I will think about for the rest of my life. It captures me running out of the building and around the corner to my car. Shortly after I exited, you could barely see the elongated shadow of someone standing by the door beneath the camera, watching me run away, the person casting it being just out of frame, before turning the opposite direction and disappearing. Just seeing my terrified self running away and that shadow watching me do so. I've never felt so vulnerable. I'm not really a believer in the paranormal, but I just don't know what kind of sick person would wait in a restaurant for 2 hours after close. Not steal anything, just to scare the employee locking up. I know for a fact it wasn't any of my coworkers. Obviously there wasn't much that could be done to find out who it was. Nothing shows anyone entering the building after closing it, and from what we could tell, everyone who entered that day had left. This event still has me questioning myself on whether it was a sick prank, someone mentally ill, or something supernatural. For context, I am highly skeptical but no stranger to the paranormal. I'm the type that believes demons exist, but most ghost stories are overreactions of easily explained phenomena or simply hoaxes. About 3 months ago, I started working security for a hotel that was built back in the 1920s by a major hotel chain that has changed hands multiple times and is now owned by one of the biggest hotel chains. I'm not saying which, so the company can't sue me. Now from what I've been told, paranormal activity is not a common occurrence in the hotel, but some years back the Make-A-Wish Foundation started sending some children here because, well, it's a major resort at one of the most popular beaches on the East Coast, why wouldn't they? However, the hotel was not informed of this and didn't realize what was happening until several children died in their rooms over the course of a few weeks. Supposedly on quiet nights, you can hear children playing with a ball in the North Tower ballrooms at night. For years, guests complained of children playing ball loudly next to their rooms, and when security would check, there would be no one there. This has not happened in a while, but going into this story, you should understand that my opinion on the cause of what I've seen may be warped by being told this story. Now every shift we do a floor check, especially on night shift when I work. At first I never noticed anything strange. I got a little creeped out by the quiet of the floors at night, but nothing supernatural. The hotel has 2 separate towers separated by a restaurant and shopping area that connects them. About a month into the job, and suddenly I started feeling like something was following me on my floor checks, especially in the street, which is the biggest and tallest and where I understand most jumpers choose because all the rooms facing the ocean have sliding glass doors with a short railing in front, and you can put the rest together from there. Anyway, it got really bad in October. Maybe the spooky season had an effect on me, but this feeling of being watched and followed never went away. As the weeks have gone on, I started seeing distorted faces in windows as I passed by, to the point I no longer look at them. The floor pattern sometimes reflects on the glass, and the mind could easily make a face with the pattern, but some of these faces were up further on the glass where this wouldn't have been possible. When I focus up there, sometimes I can almost hear whispers in the back of my mind, urging me to end myself, lambasting me for the mistakes I've made, or even telling me insecurities I have about myself I've never told anyone about. In the last few weeks, some strange physical and auditory phenomena have occurred. Part of what we do on floor checks is close doors we find open, and some of the doors lately have been more difficult to close. One in particular I had to use all my strength to slam shut. The ice machines on each floor sometimes make a banging noise while in operation, so I usually attribute any noise I hear from the vending area to that, but sometimes it almost sounds like something was rummaging in the garbage cans, and when I'd go to investigate, I'd hold my keys so they wouldn't jingle in case it was a person, and as soon as I do, the rummaging noise will stop. On a couple of occasions I've felt what I can only describe as hands touching me while closing certain doors, sometimes just a tickle and other times a brush against the back of my hand, and even a feeling like someone on the other side of the door is pulling it in the opposite direction against me. I now dread the floor checks, especially after 3 a.m. I'm not trying to make this seem scarier than it is, but these things intensify the closer it gets to that hour. Whatever they aren't friendly, and I think they know I can sense them. They really don't like that I can sense them, like some nights that watched and followed feeling is more like a burning hatred directed towards my existence, like being stalked by an enemy or a predator. I'm pretty religious, and whenever these things happen, I always pray to God, and when I do, it usually goes away, whatever it is. The scariest thing though is the last time it was that intense, I heard something growl next to my ear. I've never been hurt by them, so my assumption is they can't hurt anyone physically, but they try to communicate often and want their presence acknowledged. It's almost as though that's where their power comes from. My grandmother told me once that demons truly have no power, they are only capable of whatever we believe them to be capable of. My mounting fear is feeding them whatever they are. My experiences could be just seeing things or looking too much into something completely explainable. This is just what I've seen and heard. Whatever it is hunting me at night, my coworkers don't know about it, or at least they aren't telling anyone. I am bipolar but medicated, and I've never had hallucinations. Maybe I'm just crazy and seeing things, but if that's the case, why am I not having any other signs of a manic episode or psychosis, and why am I only noticing things in that one part of the building? After I graduated last May, I decided to take up a job at my local jail. Nothing long term, just figured I'd work a year and save up some cash before college. Flash forward a little bit, and I'm only a few weeks into training. I've always liked the idea that ghosts really existed, but at that point, I couldn't say I ever actually saw one. However, that all changed while taking post one night. The time was a little after 5 a.m., and I was sitting behind my desk, absolutely bored to tears. So, being a good little deputy, I was spinning around in my chair, honestly trying not to fall asleep. This was hour 11 of a 12-hour shift, so I'm just killing time before I get to go home. Now, to give you a little visual of where I am, I'm in a big, giant room with a bunch of cells. At one end of the room is the officer's desk with big windows behind it. These windows are super reflective, so officers can look into the pod from the hallway, but inmates can't look out into the hallway from inside the pod. At the other end of this pod are all the cells. This particular pod has some cells that were behind a second pane of glass. Still with me? Because this is important, I promise. Anyways, I'm spinning around in my chair at my desk and happen to glance up at the reflective windows behind the desk. As I do, some movement catches my eye upstairs. There is someone walking around upstairs. Out of their cell, but behind the glass. I stare at disbelief for a moment and instantly freak the duck out. I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of holy ducking shit, who the hell is out of their cell at this hour? Aw man, my ass is ducking grass, man. I quickly turn around and see no one up there. I scramble and check the monitor that gives me control of the cell doors and make sure all of them are locked, which they are. I even go up there myself and make sure everything is as secure as can be. Somewhere in the middle, me making sure I'm not about to get fired, it dawned on me. That was a mother ducking ghost. There was no mistaking it. I 1000% saw someone up there. Now, I don't mean I saw a quick little shadow or a suspicious looking speckle of dust. No, I was distinctly looking at someone in an orange jumpsuit walking around up there. I could tell you this guy's haircut, his height, his general build, and even what kind of beard he had. To be honest, I was totally banking on this happening at some point. I mean, from my first day, I could tell that place was uber haunted. So I immediately get my corporal on the horn and tell her excitedly that I saw a ghost. But things don't end there. After that, I was bragging to anyone and everyone about my little encounter with some mixed reactions. My sergeant says he doesn't really believe in ghosts. But some deputies told me they've definitely seen some paranormal stuff on duty too. However, it's what the sergeant on day shift shared that has really stuck with me. He told me that they had an inmate commit suicide in that same pod a few years prior. I had already been told that by a few people who've been there a while. I gave a description of the guy I saw, and we decided to look up the inmate just to see if they looked the same. It was him. It was definitely the guy I saw walking around upstairs. Right down to his skinny face and the billy goat beard, there was no mistaking it. I've talked to some inmates about it, and I've had more than one tell me that sometimes they can see/hear someone walk by their cells and peeking in at the late hours of the night. It can't be a correctional officer they're talking about because they're always wearing an orange jumpsuit. Well, that's my spooky experience. About 9 months ago, I began working as a hospital security guard at a major hospital in my city. It's been the most exciting and enjoyable job I've ever had. I'm incredibly grateful for it, as I've made many new friends and accumulated countless stories to share. The saying, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life, really rings true for me. I've had such a variety of experiences, from arresting trespassers to dealing with mental health patients and searching for missing individuals, the list goes on. But those stories are for another day. Today, I want to talk about something different, my experience with the paranormal. Before I started this job, I was already intrigued by the idea of paranormal activity in a major hospital. I mean, people pass away in hospitals every day, so you'd think it would be a hotspot for ghostly encounters, right? I wish I could say I've seen ghosts chasing me down the halls or bodies mysteriously moving on their own in the morgue, but honestly, nothing quite like that has happened. Still, I wouldn't be writing this if I had experienced nothing at all. To give you a better understanding of the hospital's layout, let me explain where security is stationed. There are 4 main buildings we cover. The first is the main hospital, which houses the emergency room and over 1,000 beds for both kids and adults. We typically have at least 8 guards handling calls in this building, with 1 guard stationed in the emergency room at all times since that's where most calls come from. It's worth noting that I'm in Canada, so anyone can come to the hospital for any reason, free of charge. The second building, located across the street, is an 8-story medical clinic that requires just 1 guard. This guard also has to patrol the adjacent old clinic building, which is now primarily used for treating children with eating disorders. This is where the story I'm about to share takes place. The last building is the cancer clinic, which requires 2 guards at all times and is the closest to the medical clinic if assistance is needed. When I first started the job and was shown around the various buildings, the old clinic, which we'll call the asbestos clinic due to its history of asbestos issues, immediately stood out to me. It's a building that, in my opinion, should have been demolished long ago. During my initial walkthrough, a fellow guard told me that this building was haunted by a young girl who took her own life on the 2nd floor. He also mentioned that the basement was haunted. The whole building used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium back in the 50s and 60s, with tunnels in the basement that were once used to transport bodies. About a month ago, it was my turn to work at the clinic during a night shift, and I was determined to experience some paranormal activity. I had done countless patrols of the asbestos clinic before, but nothing much had happened, aside from the elevators occasionally opening on their own, which was apparently normal. But that night, things changed. I had heard plenty of stories from other guards about strange occurrences in the clinic, but I had never experienced anything myself. I decided to do my patrol at 3 a.m., which is often said to be the prime time for paranormal activity. I began my patrol by walking around the exterior of the building, checking all the entrances to ensure they were locked. The building closes relatively early, around 8 p.m., so by then, it should be completely empty. However, I noticed that one of the exterior doors was slightly open. This concerned me because it had been closed during my first patrol. The building doesn't have any interior cameras, so when something like this happens at night, I have to check every unlocked room inside to make sure no one is inside. I entered the building and started my patrol of the 1st floor, checking every door and hallway. No one was there. As I approached the elevator to go up to the 2nd floor, I heard a faint creaking sound, like a door opening. I immediately radioed my team lead, informing her that I had found an open door and was hearing noises. I told her I was going to conduct a thorough patrol, and she sent one of the guards from the cancer clinic, whom we'll call Fred, to assist me. After searching the 1st floor again and finding nothing, Fred arrived. He told me he would start searching the 3rd and 4th floors while I covered the 2nd floor and basement. As I was searching the 2nd floor, I heard the same creaking noise again, the sound of a door opening. I radioed Fred to come down, still not considering the possibility of anything paranormal. We've had incidents of homeless people breaking in to find a place to sleep, though it's rare for them to target the asbestos clinic since it's usually locked. We searched every room on the 2nd floor but found nothing. After thoroughly checking the entire clinic, we concluded that no one was inside. Fred returned to the cancer clinic, and my team lead made a joke that it was probably just a ghost. That got me thinking, this might be the perfect time to continue my ghost hunting. I went back into the building, determined to capture some activity. I sat down in a chair on the 2nd floor, waiting to see if anything would happen. After about 10 minutes of nothing, I got bored and decided to head down to the basement. The basement is an eerie place, filled with tunnels that mostly lead to nowhere now. I decided to explore one of them since I had never done it before, and it seemed like the perfect time. Once I exited the elevator, I made my way to one of the locked doors leading to the longest tunnel. Most of the tunnels were completely blocked off, but this one stretched on. I unlocked the door and ventured down the tunnel, taking note of my radio beeping to indicate that it had lost signal, a common issue in basement areas. As I reached the end of the tunnel, my flashlight started to flicker. I decided to stand still and listen, and to my shock, I heard a blood-curdling female scream coming from the start of the tunnel. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned around, pointing my flickering flashlight back toward the entrance, and started running toward the scream. When I reached the entrance, I tried to radio my team lead, but my radio was still out of signal. I looked around the basement and noticed that one of the doors was open. This door was supposed to be locked, with only security having access to the keys. I looked inside the room, but no one was there. My heart was racing. I closed the door and headed back upstairs to get a radio signal. I was still unsure if what I experienced was paranormal. Once I was back on the main floor, I radioed my team lead to let her know what happened. She sent Fred back to help me investigate the source of the scream. When he arrived, we went back to the basement. I showed him the room that had been opened, and we both noticed a very distinct and strong smell, like that of a decomposing body. Having spent time in the hospital morgue, I was all too familiar with that smell. We searched the room but found nothing. Fred joked that the room might have been used for tuberculosis patients who didn't make it, but in truth, none of us were sure what that room had been used for. We determined that everything was fine, and I decided I had spent enough time in the asbestos clinic for one night. Ever since that experience, I've rushed through my patrols in the basement, as that smell still lingers every time I pass by that room. So, what do you think? Was this a paranormal experience, or something else? Should I investigate further? I have been working as a guard for a few months and at the same site for the same amount of time, and I have noticed noises and odd occurrences since my first day. The layout of my patrol is a two-part office building, one side, north side, NS, using only one floor for offices, the second floor, and the first floor for storage for spare chairs and cubicle walls. The other side, south side, SS, was abandoned when the company housed in that section moved to a new location, both floors being filled with cubicles, chairs, desks, and posters dating back to 2013. No files or personal property are in the south section, but the lights don't work properly due to weather damage in 2016. When I start a patrol, I start on the bottom floor of the north offices, which is mostly barren aside from a tornado shelter, cubicle walls stored against a wall, and the janitor's supply room. Down on this floor, I have felt my jacket grabbed more than once while checking the area. The second floor with the offices is more active than the bottom floor, where chairs move and roll into the hallway and the sound of the filing cabinet slamming shut, but when I check to see if anyone is around, I find some half open and papers on the floor. The south building is the worst one. The first day I did a patrol, I had chairs, not desk ones with wheels, move positions more than once, and while I'd like to blame my coworkers, only 2 people have keycards to that building, security, and maintenance. When I'm on the top floor, I have heard office doors slam, and when I investigate to find the doors, I routinely hear footsteps upstairs. My coworkers have claimed to hear voices and seen shadows, and the closest thing I've had happen besides the sounds was a flashlight, new batteries that I replaced the day before, constantly flickering on the bottom floor of the south building, and returning to normal when I leave. Now I will be trying an investigation of my own sometime on Tuesday, going to take a digital recorder in and see if anything happens. I will be trying to replicate the flashlight issue to see if it was just a hardware issue. Anyone have any good tips for this kind of thing? Experiences as a church chaplain and demonologist. My experiences as an Order of St. John chaplain and demonologist. It's hard to know where to start, to be honest, but the most important thing I think is to say that these are my beliefs and experiences. I certainly don't begrudge you yours and definitely don't want to assert any kind of authority over the beliefs of others. As chaplains, we are not positioned within a church because we minister to communities. It is not our place to judge any member of that community, but only to care for and support them in their needs. Also, rule number 1 of the job is to disprove, and disprove again. Other than that, to save you the trouble, I'll write things in order of how much interest I think they'd get. Experiences, some insight into our processes, what I'm allowed to speak to, how I got into the field, and then the training I undertook. Experiences. General and passive paranormal experiences are part and parcel of the job. I'll touch on it more later, but I'm not afraid of things that go bump in the night. I used to be, but once you've studied and understood it, the paranormal loses its excitement and becomes more of a puzzle that needs to be solved. My passive experiences are things like every month or so I'll have new knocking on our doors and windows, even though we live in a secure 3rd floor apartment. I get random props and pokes when I'm by myself, whispering, murmuring, growling, scratching, electrical interference, random mists, distorted shadows, and shadow figures here and there. This has all become a weekly occurrence, although when I say that it's usually just one of these things that happens, I deal with it, and it goes away almost immediately. The hitchhiker. This is probably my most fascinating one because it's a recurring event that happens every couple of months, and I haven't yet solved the puzzle. I travel a lot for my role. At the moment I've been sent to one of our small towns to train people, run mental health programs, or help with large-scale crisis responses. This results in my driving for long hours, sometimes during the day and sometimes at night. I will see the same stocky, hitchhiking figure walking along the side of the road in a black hoodie and jeans, with hood up, thumb out. I've never stopped, and he's never turned around when I've approached. I've seen him at every point in the day, dawn, day, dusk, night. I've seen him in locations several hours drive from each location. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but hitchhiking is really uncommon in our country. We're small, and buses are cheap. Howling. This is another recurring one, although it's newer. It's more annoying than anything else, to be honest, but several times my partner and I have been woken to a long howl in our bedroom. We're windows closed, apartment unit like I said, but it's ruining my sleep, and I really enjoy my sleep. Cloaked figure. This is one that I've thankfully resolved but had to deal with over a series of years. To cut a long story short, whenever I was in the middle of a really tough case supporting someone in what we call spiritual warfare, I'd get a visit from whatever this was. It was the same every time, where I would have a dream of a cloaked figure, wake up to a spinning room, and be choking. I've had sleep paralysis episodes before, but this was certainly different. I'm still half convinced this was some kind of sleep apnea issue or episode. The only thing that makes me think it was paranormal is because it happened without fail when I dreamt of this figure, and it stopped after I put some intentional work into stopping it. There are experiences of clients that I cannot share because I've made a strict confidentiality agreement with them, and that rests on my soul. But, generally speaking, I've helped people deal with their psychological issues more than spiritual. Some spiritual ones have been fascinating, and there's a feeling I get when there's a really obvious sign of oppression or infestation. It's like a heavy feeling on my chest and stuffy air. I've helped people by blessing their houses, which is a complicated process and, depending on your beliefs, can be somewhat risky. You essentially have to call forth the oppressing force, challenge it, rebuke it, and either condemn it or suppress it, if it can't be dealt with in one blessing. I've also helped people with deliverance, although I'm not big on the evangelical deliverance ministry. We're a more traditional denomination, but I've never helped with an exorcism. I'm still relatively young for my role, and while I am a commissioned member of the order, I'm not yet a fully appointed minister. Processes. We have to be careful with what we share, and that's for a really inane reason. We often get people who either want to play a prank or desperately want something paranormal to be happening, and the information we don't share is essentially the key information we need while triaging our cases. What I can say is that how we view the paranormal is unusual. Anything paranormal, by our theology, is demonological, angelic, or the Holy Spirit. When it comes to things that we humans get scared of, we're hardwired to be scared of the paranormal if we believe in it. It's a non-interactable nocturnal threat, and we are diurnal creatures. It's really easy to trigger our limbic system. However, and again, just from my view, I see paranormal activity as the parlor tricks of a damned and jealous entity, but I have the power to send it back where it belongs, and it knows that, so it will struggle however it can. It will try and scare me because it is scared of me. And it should be, I'm there to do a job. It's like spiritual pest extermination. But a moving cup, whispering, growling, etc. is nowhere as scary to me as, say, driving in heavy rain or the things I dealt with as a bouncer, while I studied. Humans, dogs, even cats, are more dangerous than most hauntings or paranormal experiences. One exception is that possession is incredibly dangerous but intensely rare. I'm not scared of these things, not because I'm tough or brave, but because they're not actually dangerous. And they need to be condemned. That being said, if we go through an intensive investigatory process, it looks like this. We are a medical order. We're the Knights Hospitallers. We're also an indigenously focused arm of the order, and our indigeneity gives us a different worldview. When we assess a person, we don't just look at their spiritual health, we look at their social, physical, and psychological health as well. The first thing we will do, fully funded, is have the person see a doctor and a psychologist for assessment. This isn't because we think they're crazy, it's because we're building a comprehensive profile for exactly what we're dealing with. If someone is positive for physical or mental health issues that could be causing symptoms that they believe are spiritual, we need to treat those issues and see if the symptoms go away. Our church fully covers any costs associated with this process. If that doesn't solve the problem, my job is to definitively disprove the existence of paranormal activity or presences, but do so while believing there may well be a presence. Skepticism is a good thing most of the time, but it's sometimes bad. We're not there to assume the issue is mundane. We take all the information we can, assess it, and arrive at the likely outcomes, and we consider spiritual outcomes to be similarly as likely as mundane ones. However, we still need to disprove all of the mundane theories we can. But there's another layer. We also need to prove all of the mundane theories. This helps us have a quality of information. So we won't be happy to say, oh, it's probably just this mundane thing, unless we can prove that. After this, if there is persistence of a spiritual issue, we begin our church-sanctified processes of blessings and protections for the affected individual. These interventions vary in intensity depending on the person, their faith relationship, and the persistence of whatever we're dealing with. How I got into the field. I didn't take a standard pathway. A standard pathway is that you attend a church that believes in demonological study, get as involved as possible with whatever you can, talk to the pastor about your desire to study and follow this pathway, and see if the church will support you. It's a long pathway, though. You can also try to become a lay chaplain for certain denominations, but honestly, the best thing you can do is wholeheartedly commit to a church, show them you're willing, and they'll support your journey. My pathway was that I studied a youth psychology degree and specialized in youth gangs. Then a church was investing in the community and looking for a Christian with my expertise to be their youth pastor. I worked there for some time, and after a bit of a journey, I came back to my home denomination, and that's who I work for now. I got a master's in professional practice, chaplaincy, and a diploma in demonology. But my psychology knowledge is what sets me apart for this ministry in the eyes of the church. I'm much more equipped to do a referral assessment than many of the clergy or congregation. My training in demonology comes from several sources. I completed the diploma at Bible College, but I've also done a small amount of training under a course from Bishop James Long. I did the Paranormal Academy of the United Kingdom online course because it was non-Christian, and I trained under our Archbishop for some time to specifically respond to the needs of the community in this regard. As a chaplain, this calling fit under my purview in his eyes. When I need to escalate church involvement, I can go straight to him. He taught me our beliefs, blessings, the processes of our church, etc. He also taught me our church's stance on demonology, which is old school. We're Anglican. King James was a demonologist, so it's a particular field for us. That's pretty much it. I'm always open to helping people on here, so if you have trouble, please just reach out through a message. I'm also happy to answer questions and engage in discourse, although I'm not going to be entirely engaging in what-ifs from the stories. For me, it is almost impossible to prove the paranormal online due to the nature of the evidence and how easily it can be faked. So I'm not going to go into that. And I've peer-reviewed these things with my colleagues.